Hello there, and you are there, and I am here. And this is the first in a new series of videos looking at the court proceedings that found Luke Mitchell guilty of the 2003 murder of his then girlfriend, Jodi Jones. Of course, this is going to be a wee bit longer than the updates we've been doing. There's a lot of reading to be done in these, so you'll have to bear with me on that. Today I want to start with probably one of the main reasons that we can see guilt on the part of Luke Mitchell, and that's the lack of alibi. So to get the bigger elephant in the room out of the way, so to speak, and not build up to it as such, we're going to start today with Luke Mitchell's brother's testimony, Shane Mitchell, that was taken over 3 days. As I say, a bit heavy reading. I believe there's around about 260 pages to go through. However, 19 or so of those pages on the first day is just a quick thing that we can cover off and kind of discuss before we move on to day 2. So, without further ado, however you want to put it, let's get on with day 1 of Shane Mitchell's testimony, and we can kind of discuss this all. Now, also before I get on with this, if this has all gone to plan, this should be premiering on YouTube, so we should be live and I should be within the chat. If that's the case, hello guys. In fact, it is the case. I'm going to do this. Yeah, definitely. Just set myself a target. Hi guys. Hi in the chat. Feel free to comment on anything that you think I've missed or whilst we're going along. I'll certainly be there to take notes if there's anything I think that's worth jotting down as well, and bring up maybe in the next video, which we'll discuss at the end of this one. Also, I would say we will still be doing killing time updates, but they're more reactionary. I've got a couple that I want to do after Scott Forbes' last podcast appearance and another couple of things that have happened, but again, just make a start on these. Those can come in time as well. Again, this will be kept as a separate playlist, so if you guys ever want to keep up to date with this or you want to find anything in there, it should be easy to source. So let's get on with the first day and see where we go for there. Okay. So as I say, the day 1 of Shane Mitchell's testimony is quite straightforward and only really lasted all of 5 minutes within the court, really. But just to kind of cover this off, all the transcripts themselves do come with the list of kind of people involved in the case itself, and they're on every transcript that's provided. But just kind of cover that off. The Honourable Lord Nimmo Smith and the jury are present in the court. I'll put this up obviously on the screen as well. It's an extract of evidence, and of course it's on what the case is related to. Luke Mitchell, and the 10th of January 2005. Says they're appearing Mr. A. Turnbull, QC, Advocate Depute, J. Bain, obviously they're that Latin for and. I am very cultured. I can speak Latin. There you go, there's a little fact about me. I don't know why, it's a dead language and it's absolutely useless, but I can. So J. Bain appearing for the Crown, Mr. D. Finlay QC, V. Young, J. Farquharson, appearing for the accused. The tape transcription services are provided by Chris Gilkison, William Hodge, and Pollock Limited, Central Chambers, 5th floor, 93 Hope Street, Glasgow. Or for the folks across the pond, you say Glasgow, don't you? Which I never understood, and then I realised it's because the word cow, and Americans think that we should just pronounce it gow. Glasgow, guys. Get rid of that W. That's a strange rant. Anyway, as I say, so looking at it, the next page again, very small. I'll put it up there just to show you, don't get me wrong. The index, Shane Mitchell's examination in chief by the Advocate Depute 2006. being Alan Turnbull. 10th of January 2005. So this is where we kind of get into it. So Shane Mitchell, 23, sworn. So I'll kind of just, I don't want to do voices, but I might kind of do tones, guys. Do apologise, there's a lot of reading. So I do apologise if I kind of, anyway, sound derisory, sarcastic or anything. This is my apology here, I'm not putting it all the way through. So, Mr. Findlay. My lord, I rise to my feet because while I am not Mr. Mitchell's advocate, meaning Shane, there is material known to me which suggests that he, on the face of it, is entitled to a warrant. So Lord Nimmo Smith then asks, even when he is called as a Crown witness? Mr. Findlay replies, yes, that is not a complete answer. Lord Nimmo Smith, does this require further discussion? And the Advocate Depute, Turnbull there, it may do no harm, my lord. So Lord Nimmo Smith then says, do you think it would be appropriate if I give a warning? The Advocate Depute replies, no, it would do no harm to have further discussion. So Lord Nimmo Smith then says, I beg your pardon, I think we'll have to have the discussion out with the presence of the jury and the witness. So at that point, so at this point, 12:41:40, the jury and witness have left the court. The Advocate Depute then says, my lord, perhaps it would help, if I explain what I know of the factual background. My lord may have understood already from some of the documentary productions that Mr. Mitchell was detained and interviewed on the 14th of April of 2004 and was arrested and charged at the conclusion of that. Accordingly, I assume that this is what Mr. Findlay is referring to. However, it is my understanding that by now these proceedings have been marked for no further proceedings, and I can certainly undertake that there will be no further proceedings in respect of the matter for which he was arrested. So Lord Nimmo Smith asks, does he know that? And the Advocate Deputy replies, does he know that, my lord? Nimmo Smith, yes. Advocate Deputy, I'm not certain, but he can be told that if there's any doubt about it, and that would certainly remove the need for any warning of the sort. And incomprehensible there. Happens a lot during these. If I can, I'll try and fill in the blanks, but sometimes it is a bit impossible and you just can't really get your head around it. Someone else might be able to, so if you can, in the comments. I would then respectfully, it would then respectfully seem to me that the witness would be obliged to answer questions rather than being entitled not to. Now, if you're struggling with this, guys, I will kind of go through it then, but let's just get through the kind of what was said. Lord Nimmo Smith, yes, I understand more about why Mr. Findlay has raised this matter now. So the Advocate Depute agrees. Lord Nimmo Smith says, if the Crown don't propose to keep any possible proceedings against him live, then there is no need to give a warning. So the Advocate Depute agrees. Lord Nimmo Smith then, does that deal with the point that you very properly raised, Mr. Findlay? Mr. Findlay says, yes, my lord, that is a public renunciation on behalf of the Lord Advocate, so a warning is no longer necessary. Lord Nimmo Smith then says, yes, well, no doubt the Advocate Depute will find some opportunity to bringing this in. Mr. Findlay, a matter for him and Lord Nimmo Smith, or maybe he doesn't. So discussing what the kind of legal ramifications are for Shane. Mr. Findlay, I would simply suggest that in fairness the witness is entitled to be told because he may be uncertain as to what his position is. Lord Nimmo Smith agrees. Mr. Findlay says, I don't know if he's taken legal advice on the matter, and if it's a matter of fairness, that is ultimately a matter for your lordship. The suggestion, for what it's worth, that out with the presence of the jury, my lord, can give him that advice. So Donald Findlay does suggest that he tells Shane Mitchell all this out with the jury itself. So I think carries on, sorry. So I think if the witness can now be brought back into court, and I think Advocate Depute, if you simply stand up and inform me in the presence of the witness of the Crown's position on the matter, and incomprehensible. Probably that should take care of that. At this point at 12:45, so about 4 minutes, just under 4 minutes, 3 minutes and 20 seconds I think it is, isn't it? The witness returned to the court. By the court, Mr. Mitchell, a question arose as to whether I require to give you a warning that you needn't answer any questions if the answer to that question would tend to incriminate you in the commission of any criminal offence. But the Advocate Depute has, in your absence, told me something which I would like him to repeat in your presence. Then Alan Turnbull, the Advocate Depute himself: My Lord, on the 14th of April 2004, Mr. Mitchell was arrested and charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice in relation to the murder of Jodi Jones. The Crown do not intend to take any any further proceedings in respect of that charge. So by the court, in the view of that, Mr. Mitchell, which I hope you clearly understand, you're not now the subject of any live potential criminal proceedings. I'm not going to give you that warning, and the result of that is you must answer all the questions you are asked, and obviously answer them truthfully. Right, well, evidence can now proceed in the presence of the jury. At this point, 12:47, the jury returned to the court. Now, the Lord Nimmo Smith, ladies and gentlemen, in your absence, there has been a discussion about the matter Mr. Finlay raised. You heard him make reference to a possible warning being given to the witness. I don't propose to make mention of what that was all about, but in the light of certain information I have been given, I am not giving any such warning. His evidence will simply proceed. Yes, Advocate Depute. Now you got here examination in chief by the Lord Advocate Depute. Mr. Mitchell, is your name Shane Mitchell? Yes. What age are you, please? 23. 23, yeah. I don't know, that sounds like a song. 23, yeah. You are the brother of Luke Mitchell? Yes. And Luke Mitchell sits here between the two officers? Yes. And on June of last year, you did live at, and then gives a family address? Yes, 2004. In June of 2003, and then he replies 2003. Now, let's just carry on with this, and will we? No, let's stop there. Stop. Let's have a wee quick stop there. So, as you can see, the jury and the witness, Shane, taken out the court so they can discuss ongoing proceedings. Now, that was really in relation to the fact that some of Shane Mitchell's testimony, his statements, kind of implied that he was lying for his brother. Other things come out during all of this, which we'll get into, but essentially, just to cover that off for those that don't know, really dropping the charges, much like any other case, means that then Shane is not culpable for anything that he may be guilty of at that time. So what we're looking at is using his evidence or his testimony as, anything to back up the fact that Luke Mitchell did not have an alibi. To ask him the questions whilst there was live proceedings would then put him in a position where he could incriminate himself. So I know a lot of people might look at the idea that the charges were dropped against Shane and Corrine and think, well, that's a sign of innocence. But in reality, it's a tactic used so that, Alan Turnbull can ask the questions that he needs to ask. Rather than, charging them, arresting them for what would probably be a minimum term in a lot of cases, then they use it to their advantage in this case and have him basically give evidence against his own brother. So that's kind of covers that off in the sense that I know a lot of people say, why were the two not charged? That's the simple answer. They wanted to use them as evidence against Luke, and they did rather successfully, and we'll show one of them today. So, getting back into it now here, We should be on page 9 of 19 if you guys are looking at the transcripts, but obviously they're on the screen anyway. But so Shane's agreed to the dates where he lived at the family home. He's then been asked, do you still live at, and then gives the address. I do have the address, but I'm not going to go over everything that's been redacted here because I'd be here too long. Some of it isn't redacted. No offence to the people that done the transcripts, but you kind of missed a couple. But I don't blame you. There's so much stuff in there. So he had said that he didn't live there, and they asked, when did you stop living there? April or May in 2004. Now that's an important date, so stick that in your mind there. April and May 2004, and you'll see why. Alright, you would understand that in 2003 your brother Luke had a girlfriend called Jodi Jones. Yes. And you know that she was killed on Monday, 30th of June 2003. And he replies yes. In the days and weeks following that incident, were you interviewed by police officers? Yes. And did you speak to the police more than once? Yes. And did you give them statements? Yes. Which were recorded in handwriting? Yes. Now on the 14th of April 2004, your brother was arrested. You remember that? Yes. And you were also interviewed that day by the police. Were you? And he replies yes. And your interview took place at a police station, is that right? Yes. And was tape recorded? Yes. And at that time, you were under detention. You were being detained in terms of a power that the police officers have. And he replies yes. Shane replies yes. The interview that you gave was an interview in which you were cautioned. Is that right? And he agrees. You were cautioned that you weren't obliged to say anything, but that anything you did say would be noted and might be used in evidence. Yes. This is in relation, of course, to that perversion of the course of justice there. So, and you were being told that during the course of the interview that the police was suspected that you might have deliberately given them false information earlier in the inquiry. And he says yes. You were released from the police station, I think, after a period of hours had passed. Is that right? Shane agrees again. And since his arrest, however, your brother has been kept in custody awaiting trial. And he agrees. So at that point, and during the April 14th, Luke Mitchell was arrested and charged, kept in custody in relation to the murder of Jodi Jones, which obviously had happened in 2003, long going investigation. 2004, April 14th, he was actually arrested over it. So again, I'll put in here the idea that it was a stick-on certainty for the police and they didn't have anybody else that were looking into. I mean, that's a long time to investigate. It wasn't a rushed investigation. So I don't buy into that either. I think that's just the carnies at work. So Alan Turnbull goes on to ask a couple of questions, which goes back to that date I was talking about in April where Shane moved out of the family home. He asks him, have you visited him since his arrest? And he does say yes. He says, how many times? 2 or 3 times. And when was the last time? I think June or July last year. So April, May, June, July. So just round about the time that he moves out the family home, he visits his brother for the last time, and a year later is given evidence in court. That speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned, and I think people really need to look into that a little bit more. We have spoke about the idea that Shane, his brother, and Philip, Luke's father, are very distant from this whole thing. I have some more news about that, but that's not the place to be breaking it here. But that I believe this is where the kind of relationship fell apart. Moving out the house. I mean, I'm speculation station, I suppose, to a certain degree, but moving out the house round about that April time, then visiting one more time, and then gone. Very suspicious if you ask me, but that's the way it works. So, carrying on. Alright, and since your interview with the police on the 14th of April last year, were you also asked to attend at the Prosecutor Fiscal's office in Edinburgh? And he agrees. You did attend there on Wednesday the 29th of September of last year, which would be the 2004, not long after his last visit to his brother. He agrees with that. Is that right? Agrees again. And you were interviewed there by a member of the Procurator Fiscal's staff, and he says yes. And you were asked about the events of the 30th of June 2003, yes. And did you give to the Prosecutor Fiscal an account of the events on the 30th of June 2003? He says, I can't remember exactly what was discussed that day. Now, I can kinda understand where a lot of this comes from, but I will cover this off during this. A lot of people are going to struggle to remember things from 2003, late 2005. That's 2 years. It's standard. I struggle to remember what I'd done 2 weeks ago. So I can understand when Shane, or anybody else for that matter, has an issue in terms of recalling stuff. Shane's is a bit different, and I'll explain why when we get into it a wee bit more, or in my opinion it's a little bit different. So going on here, Alan Turnbull asks, well, I'm not asking you to tell me what passed between you, I'm just asking you to tell me whether or not you explained to him. He said, yes, I answered all of his questions. Not really answering the question itself, but he said, I'm sorry, yes, I answered all his questions. Alan Turnbull says, I follow. So he asked you questions and you answered them. Yes. Well, that's a bit bloody obvious, isn't it? Obviously asked you questions. Why else would you be... Anyway, you can tell this is going to be a long one. And did you tell the Procurator Fiscal the truth? Yes. Okay. So, would you look at me with... would you look with me at, please, at document production 157? Do you see, Mr. Mitchell, that is a collection of the various statements that you gave to the police officers? He says yes. And the first statement you gave was on Thursday the 3rd of July 2003. He agrees, and was taken, as you see from the first page, at 9:20 in the evening at Dalkeith Police Station. Shane agrees. But you may remember, it was taken by a lady police officer, Detective Constable Michelle Lindsay. Yes, a lady. Was that a lengthy statement? Very lengthy. That sounds a bit lewd. And did it cover your movements, for example, over the weekend before Jodi's killing? Shane replies, I can't remember, incomprehensible, what I intended, but it covered everything from years ago up until the weekend previously. So he'd really given a good kind of backstory. So it was a long interview covering many matters, but included the weekend of Jodi's killing. And he says yes. Did it include, for example, what time you arrived home from work on Monday the 30th of June 2003, which Shane agrees with? And he says, and did it include what you did after arriving home on that date? And Shane agrees as well. Now, do you remember what you told the police in that first statement about when you arrived home from work on Monday the 30th of June? And he says, no, I don't. Again, I'll go into this. And he says, okay, if you look with me at the first statement, you'll see that the pages are numbered. And if you turn to page 10, Lord Nimmo Smith then says, I'm not sure they are numbered, Advocate Depute. There's examination in chief continued by the Lord Advocate Depute. Are there numbers in the top right hand corner of your copies, Mr. Mitchell? No. This bit of the transcript I think is quite funny, mainly because like 4 or 5 grown men trying to figure out how pieces of paper work. It's quite funny. So, okay, would you count in to please to page 10 using the first page as page 1? Science. So Shane agrees. And if you count down 9 lines from the top, anyway, you'll see that it says at the end of the line, I got. And on to the next line, home at 15:40, 20 to 4. And he agrees. So, okay, which is 20 minutes to 4. Well, I just said that. I must have heard me. He agrees. Okay, and should we understand that then that's what Luke told Detective Constable Lindsay in the first interview? And he says yes. Alright, later that week, did you contact Detective Constable Lindsay again? And he says, I can't remember. Which is an odd answer. Well, did you subsequently make another statement on Monday 7th of July at Dalkeith Police Station, which would be a week after the murder of Jodi Jones? And he agrees. So, okay, and you had contacted Detective Constable Lindsay in between to tell her that you wanted to do that. He says, I think so. It's a very long time ago and a lot of time have passed. Now, he couldn't remember if he contacted her, but now he thinks so. Shane's memory does tend to suit what he needs to remember. Even though this is still damning testimony, he still tried. He really did still try. Especially when Donald Findlay asks questions. We'll get on to that. So, carrying on, Alan Turnbull had said, well, I understand that. And Shane said, but I believe I wanted to make a second statement as there was errors in my first one. Okay, and should we understand that you contacted Detective Constable Lindsay to explain that to her? Now it's a yes. It went from I can't remember to I don't know, it was a long time ago, I think so, to yes. Evolution. And on Monday 7th of July, which was 1 week after Jodi's killing, did you in fact give another lengthy statement to Detective Constable Lindsay? And he says yes. Now, and again with that statement, did you cover matters which may include your movements over the week before Jodi's killing? And he says yes. And then again in that second statement, did you give to Detective Constable Lindsay details of your movements on the Monday? And he says yes. And again, did you include what time you arrived home from work? Yes. And did you also include what you did after getting home from work? Yes. And did you remember what you told Detective Constable Lindsay in the second statement about when you arrived home from work on Monday the 30th of June? Not at this time, no. Can someone, anyone, anybody, just a wee bit of Fred Duster for you.
So somebody, anybody, everybody, get the fuck up!
Somebody, can someone tell me how this is possible? So, he knows that he spoke about what he done when he got back from work. He knows what he spoke about what time. He knows that he said what he did when he got home. But he didn't remember what time. I don't know. None of that makes sense. So Turnbull carries on. Okay, if you look at me, look with me at the next statement in the bundle before you, you'll see it's dated Monday the 7th of July. It was taken at 4:30 in the afternoon at Dalkeith Police Station. Do you have that one? By the court, do you have that one? It's S48A. No, the production number. Yes. The examination in chief continued by the Lord. Continued by the Advocate Deputy. Sorry, Lord. Are the pages numbered in the top right hand corner of the statement? No, they are not, because this is just fucking well run. Can you count in to page 19? Oh, I forgot this happened again. For me, please. Okay. And do you see on the page that, just as before, there is handwriting and there are lines? It says yes. Would you count down to line 13 with me, please? He agrees. And you see that there is noted that you would have been home between 5 to 5 and 5 o'clock. Must be an incomprehensible here, yes. So yeah, he's agreeing. You see that you've seen that, yes. And again, should we understand that then that must be what you told Detective Constable Lindsay in that second statement? He agrees, and Alan Turnbull says okay. Lord Nimmo Smith, now that I think we're going to need to find a point to which to break for lunch, Advocate Depute. So the Advocate Depute, Alan Turnbull, says yes. Can I just do that then in one question, my lord? Nimmo Smith agrees, yes of course, and they continue. Wrapping up here, continued by the Advocate Depute. Should we understand just at this stage, Mr. Mitchell, and we'll come to the whys and the wherefores later, but should we understand that at this stage, on the Wednesday 3rd of July, you told the police that you arrived home on Monday the 30th at about 20 to 4, and on Monday the 7th of July, you told the police that you arrived home about 5 to 5 and 5 o'clock. Yes. Both times being on Monday the 30th of June. Yes. By the court, we will break now for lunch and start again at 2 o'clock. Mr. Mitchell, you obviously mustn't discuss the case with anybody at all during the lunch. Do you understand that? He agrees, and after adjournment for lunch, there was no further evidence led on that day. That was the end of proceedings for the first day of Shane Mitchell's evidence, and as you can see, it's a long one, even though we tried to get it through quick. So put up the page here at the end as well, just with the guy that actually transcribed those pages, just in case there's any doubt about the legitimacy of what I've just read to you. You can have a little look through that. I'm not going to read that just now. That's pointless reading for me. Not interested. So yeah, there's the information in there just in case you want to look at the legitimacy of what we've just read as well. Now, what's that? 30 minutes in, only about 20 odd pages, so bear with me guys, this is going to be a long one. What we need to look at here though, just to kind of summarise what we've done in the first day in evidence, is we have, verified the fact that there are changed statements on Shane Mitchell's side. Now, both Ms. Lean and Mr. Forbes, the advocate for Luke Mitchell, will make a big song and dance about changed statements from the search trio and the Jones family, whilst ignoring this. Now, I don't have any evidence or indeed proof that the idea of changed statements is true on the Jones behalf, but I can see evidence of it on the Mitchell side. Now, this is both with Shane and Kareem, which we'll cover, and in some of Luke Mitchell's own police statements, which are within both of these testimonies as well. Different stories, different people involved, different times, etc, etc. What we really need to look at is the rest of this, where obviously Shane Mitchell does tear apart the alibi itself. But let's just for now go on to day 2, stick a pin in this, and we'll get back to obviously why there's changed times. We'll get a wee bit of explanation into that. And let's also just take a second to remember that during this conversation, Shane Mitchell has still as well been informed that he will not face any charges or legal repercussions with respect to the perversion of the course of justice, as will his mother, but we'll get into that in time as well. So there is day 1. Now let's go on to day 2, and this one is a bit of a heavier read. With day 2, I will pick up the pace a little in terms of the reading and commenting. However, we're lucky in the respect that a part of day 2, quite a large chunk of it, is actually legal argument. The spoilers, it's Mr. Finlay, Donald Finlay QC, that brings the objection, after a long, lengthy discussion, it's denied by the judge, and the evidence that he is trying to keep out at the time is brought in. But I will go through that. I will just read through that, as is, maybe quick comments, you know what I'm like. But we'll just to keep it in context, so it can all be on kind of record here in one place, I will read that out as well. So as with before as well, we've got the kind of details, so to speak, on who is present, and then we kind of get into the question itself. On 12th of January 2005, Shane Mitchell, examination in chief continued by the advocate depute, which should be Alan Turnbull. Mr. Mitchell, if you remember that we were discussing matters on Monday, we'd established that first of all you gave a statement to the police on Wednesday the 3rd of July. Yes, that would have been a couple of days after the incident, the actual murder of Jodi Jones herself. And we noticed that in the statement you gave an account to the police arriving home about 20 minutes to 4 on Monday the 30th of June 2003, and he says yes. And you explained that you gave a further statement to the police on Monday 7th of July, and he agrees. And then in the second statement you explained to the police that you in fact got back sometime around 5 to 5 or 5 o'clock, which he agrees with again. Alright, and you explained to us that in between the two you had contacted Detective Constable Lindsay to explain that you had made some mistakes, and again Shane agrees. Alright, now on June 2003 you were working, I think, weren't you? Yes. Where was your employer's place of work? Was it in Dalkeith? He says no, and then he does give the where it is, but it's redacted. Again, some of these things aren't redacted, and I'll end up saying them, so you might be able to put two and two together. I do, like I said to the folks that do the transcripts, you did miss a couple, but I'm not going to judge you, considering I've listened back to the edit this first thing, and I think I said procurator wrong 2 or 3 times. I think what I'll do is, retrospectively, when I'm doing my final edit, I would have put a little counter in, so you've seen how many times what was that I said? Proseculator. That sounds like something to do with an examination. I'm getting well sidetracked. Anyway, so I see. And how did you tend to get to and from work? It says by car. Your own car? Yes. And what time did you finish work on Monday the 30th of June 2003? I think it was 3 o'clock, or it may have been 2. In the afternoon? Yes. And did you in fact have an arrangement to do something that day after work? Shane agrees. Alan Turnbull, and what was that? It was to have a look at my friend's car that was having trouble. Okay, and you know a little about cars? Yes. Of course, Scott Forbes would say that he went to the Home Farm Garage as well in some of his podcasts. I'm getting sidetracked, we need to get through this. And you know a little about cars again, so yeah, was that friend called Mr. and that's redacted, but I always like to think that when I see that his second name is in fact the C word, so just put that in there. Yes, okay. And where did he stay? Well, he stayed in the same place where his second name as well, the C word. C word, yes. And where's that? It's a couple of miles outside Bonnybridge. Now that's supposed to be Bonnyrigg. Later on it does actually correct itself, but I think that's probably just because obviously the transcripts are taken from tape recordings, so may be some issues with audio. Believe there's issues with corrupted audio on some, but again, that's for another day. So that's supposed to be Bonnyrigg, which is just outside kind of Dalkeith area, just up the road in a sense. Well, it depends what way you're going. If it's up the road, isn't it? In order to try and help Mr. Ward with his car, did you require to get something? Yes, one of my tools was broken, so I needed to replace it. Okay, would you look at me with please at the at 3 documents, production numbers 83, 84 and 85. Now these will be given to you in just a moment. Now we'll look at these one at a time, please, Mr. Mitchell. We'll start with 83 and we'll ask the operator to put it on the projector. Reminds me of being back at school. And we'll see it on the screen. Amazing. Could you give that to the operator? Thank you. Now that's a receipt, I think, isn't it? And he agrees. Is it this reading thing? Bear with me. It's from a company called, same as his mate's name. He says yes, and it's an amount of £46.40 paid for using a switch card. Yeah. And we can see that the transaction was on the 30th of June of 2003 at 3:30. Shane agrees. Now, do you know who are? He says yes. Who are they? They are a parts supplier. I see. Where are they based? Broxburn. And did you go there that afternoon? I went there straight after work. Okay. And this would seem to show that you were there at Broxburn at about 3:30. He says yes. So when he says 2 or 3, what time he finished, it's more than likely 3, wouldn't you imagine? If he's there going by, I don't know. You speak about it in the chat. What do you think? 2 or 3 o'clock? I'm going with 3, but there we go. It seems odd. You'd think to press more about that at the time. But next, please, production 84. This is an invoice from, I think it's for a number of items, and we can see what they are. And the invoices at Scott's Touring, supplied from, yes. Should we understand that this is the invoice in relation to the goods that you purchased at? Yes. And lastly, please, production 85. That's the copy of the receipt that the customer signs, isn't it? And Shane agrees. And is that your signature? And he says it is. Alright, so we can see that there is no doubt that after your work, you went to Broxburn to the automotive suppliers called... That's right. You made the purchases there about 3:30. And where did you go after that? Now that's incomprehensible. What was that intending to go to Mr. House? Yes. So we're kind of along the same, the incomprehensible. We can kind of get along the lines. He's going back to his mates with what he's got for the suppliers. Can I ask you to look with me at something else at this stage? Production 246. I'll let you cast your eye over it, and then we'll just put it onto the screen in the same way that we've been doing. You'll see it's records from of telephone calls made from your mobile. Shane agrees. Give it to the operator, please, and we'll have a look at something. You'll see that there is a call made, the third last one on the last. Brilliant. 30th of June. Oh, that makes sense. Sorry, it's because I'm reading too much. On the 30th of June 2003 at 1604. Yes. And the number called in the landline at... Right. Yes. Alright, so should we understand that you made a call, that you made that call, should we? Yes. To your own house. So the bit that was, kind of blanked out before, that was just the home address where Shane, Luke and their mother used to stay. So he says yes. And who did you speak to? I can't remember. It would have been my brother. Is that your brother Luke? Yes. So just before we move on there, let's look at that again. So that's 4:04, and he's phoned the house and believes that he must have spoke to Luke. Now there's a reason for that. Obviously his mum wouldn't have finished work, Luke would have finished school, but just keep that bit in the back of your brain. So he knows that he would have phoned and he would have spoke to Luke at 4:04. So okay, now at this time of the afternoon, you've left your work, you've been and you're making a call. Yes. What's the purpose of the call? I can't honestly remember at the time. I thought it was from the house, but that's just a mess of a sentence. So okay, my recollection isn't very good, as it was a very long time ago. Again, understandable, but some of this, the forgetfulness here with Shane, doesn't understand. It's remembering specific parts about a story but not the other, it doesn't make any sense, and it seems to be what suits them. Well, having understood that you have been to, we know where we are going after that. You were going to Mr. Would you have been at Mr. by this time? 1604. Sorry to be sarcastic about this. I don't think so. Okay, well, we know that the purpose was going to Mr. was, well, the purpose of going to Mr. was, don't we? Shane agrees, and it was to help him with his car. Shane agrees again. Okay, so presumably with your way on your way to Broxburn, that's what you were expecting to do, and he does say yes. So accordingly, when you were on your way to Broxburn with the intention of fixing his car, what sort of time did you expect to be home? So he says, I wasn't expecting to repair the car, I only diagnosed what the problem was, so it wouldn't have taken very long. Okay, probably about 5 o'clock. That's when Shane says he's expecting to get home. Do you have any recollection of the conversation that you had during the course of this telephone call? Only a very hazy one. It was to do with what was for dinner. Okay, and what time I'd be in. So basically, kind of updating what's happening. Well, that's what I was wondering about, because if it was Luke that you spoke to, should we understand that Luke tended to have a duty when he got home from school at the time? Was there something he intended to do? Not what do you mean? So Shane's kind of asking for some clarification here. If he tended to make the tea, for example, meaning dinner, for people that might not know the family meal, tea is a very Scottish way of putting it. Going for a tea. Luke made the tea quite a lot. Sometimes it would be my mother. That must be, sorry to take a sidetrack, but that must be odd for anybody that kind of looks over this from America especially. I just think it was like he was in charge of making hot beverage. Right, and if I heard you correctly there, when I asked you if you had any recollection about the content of the telephone call, yes, you said it might be to have been, it might have been what? About what was for dinner and what time it would be. Well, actually, you said what time you get home. You didn't say what time dinner would be. Dinner will be when dinner is. Do you have a microwave? Right, and presumably you would explain to him of what your plans were. I can't remember. You just said you told him that you were going to tell him what time you got home. So is that not a part of your plans? Okay, let's say for example he asked you where you were. What would you have told him? I would have told him I was going up to. Okay, and if he asked you when you would be in, what would you have told him? 5 o'clock. So yeah, kind of walk you through it. Right, after you'd finished at, yes. Now, when you got to Mr. House, do you recollect roughly what time it was? He says no. But should we understand that you think the phone call was before you got to? Not long before. I believe the phone call was made just coming into Bonnyrigg. There you go, that's that correction there from earlier on. Was it Bonnie Bridge it called it? But Bonnyrigg, there you go. Right, which is about 5 or 10 minutes away. Okay, so within a few minutes of the phone call, you would expect to be at, his friend's house. He agrees. Okay, sorry, itchy nose. How was he in? Okay, now, was he in when you got there? And he says no. He wasn't, right? Did that surprise you? Shane says it did. Yes. Okay, because you had an arrangement with him. And Shane says yes. Does he in fact have a sister? Yes. So they try to pick somebody up here. To go with your sister. What is her name? No, was her name. It's like, this is terrible. Was her name. And obviously she has the same name as Shane's friend, which is the C word. And he says yes. So he says, roughly what sort of age was she at the time? like about 17 or 18. Okay, more or less an adult, and Shane agrees. Was she in? And Shane says yes. And did you have a chat to her? And Shane agrees. He says yes. So, what did you... did you ask her where was? She says yeah. She says. Shane says yes. Now, you don't need to tell me what she told you, but did she tell you where he was? He says yes. And as a consequence, did you speak to him by phone? Shane agrees. Using which phone? I can't remember. It was either... I can't remember. I think it was their house phone. Well, you see, if you look at your list of calls from your own mobile, there is certainly not one between 1604 and 1620, and Shane agrees. That might tend to suggest that you used the house phone, and Shane agrees again, at the house. And Shane obviously agrees again. So Alan Turnbull goes on, okay, and did it turn out that taking it shortly that had in fact taken the car away? Shane says yes. And he was getting it fixed elsewhere? Shane says yes. So having gone to Max's after work, there's one, and having gone to his house at Rosewell, that's the other one, did you in fact fix the car? He says no, which is a stupid question because the car wasn't there. Or look at it at all? No. Same answer to number 2. And so instead, what did you do? He went home. Went home. Can you help us with roughly what time it would have been that when you left? And he says, I can't recall that. But you imagine it'd be round about after the phone call, depending on how long the phone call lasts. Let's say about 10 past, whatever. Okay. When you were looking at your statement on the 7th of July, Monday, we saw that you gave to the police an account of what sort of time it was when you got home. He says, right. Do you remember what you also explained to them, roughly what time you had left? I can't remember if I said that or not. Now, have a look at me, please, with that statement again, the production 157, and this one dated on the 7th. Lord Nimmo Smith then just confirms it's the number there, S48A Alpha. Advocate Deputy agrees. Have you got that one? Yes. We were looking at page 19. Remember I asked you to count to page 19 with me? Yes. And still open at that page? No. Right. It was the middle of the page, you'll remember, Mr. Mitchell. And when we saw you, you explained that you had been home at 5 to 5 or 5 o'clock. He agrees. And just a few words before that, do you see that you think that you left at 1640 or 20 to 5? Do you see that? 1640. Shane agreeing there. Is that what it says? Yes, I think. Well, it either does or it doesn't. I mean, there's not much memory recollection there. And got in about 15 minutes later, which would have been about 5 to 5 or 5 o'clock. Shane agrees again and says, right. Does that sound about right? That sounds about right. Okay, so the picture there is that we can see quite clearly is that you've been to work that day. Yes. There's no records to show where you went after you finished your work. No, sorry, there are records to show you. What am I even... There are records to show. And that tells us that you went to... And he says yes. And you explained to us that the reason you went there was you had an arrangement with, and he agrees, went to a house and turned out it wasn't in, spoke for a little time, and his sister... to his sister, sorry, and then... made your way back home, spoke to his mother there. I follow. And sorry, my computer's actually playing up here. And all of what will take you to about 5 to 5 or so. And he says yes. So, okay, and I think that we can, in the second statement, sorry, I think that we can see in the second statement, the statement on the 7th of July, you told the police all of this. Yes. Including about going to... And he agrees. Okay, and they were then able to go to and get the records to vouch that. And he says yes. Okay, when you got home to, and blanked out the address there, where did you park your car? And he says probably in the driveway. In the driveway? Yes, if not across the street. So either or, two options. Well, now you can just look at a book of photographs, please. Production number 3. You'll see just in the first photograph. Apologies, computer issues are meaning that I'm a bit distracted when I'm trying to read, so it sounds like I don't know English and I've just landed. Someone's explained what a sentence was. So, carrying on. Well now, can you just look at a book of photographs, please? Production number 3. You'll see just in the first photograph there of you showing your house, and Shane agrees. And we can see that there is a driveway from the main door leading to the garage at your house. And he says yes. Is that your car we can see in the photograph? No. Whose car is that? Shane says that is his mum's. That's your mother's car, is it? Yes. Now, where would you normally park when you came home from work? It depends. If I wasn't planning to go out that evening, sometimes I would park in the driveway and let mother come in behind me. Right. Although sometimes I would just do it anyway. No set routine. No set routine. Either be in the driveway, either mum's car, or in the parking bay just across the street from the house. Okay. I would park in the parking bay across the street from the house if I knew I was going to be out straight after dinner. Okay. And did you have plans to go out that night? I did, yes, but I didn't know what time at. Okay, so you might have parked in the driveway, or you might have parked across the road. Shane agrees. Sorry, my voice just went there. Okay. However, having got back home and having parked, should we assume that you went into the house? Shane says yes. Okay, your bedroom was on the upper floor, I think, wasn't it? Yes. And you had your own room? Shane says yes. Do you have a computer in your room? Did you have a computer in your room, at the end of June last year? Shane says yes. Would you look at me with why am I obsessed with him looking at Alan Turnbull? Would you look with me at label 593? You can see that this is your computer, Mr. Mitchell. He says yes. And look at me again. Look with me. Jesus, look at me. In the book of photographs at photograph AW. Yes. That is a picture of your room, I think, as it was then. Yes. And that's your computer set up there that we can see towards the right hand side. And he says yes. So it's connected to a monitor and a printer and a keyboard and everything. And he says yes. Okay. Was your computer also connected to the internet? Yes. Did you have an account with FreeServe? Yes. Oh, that's old. FreeServe. And when you went home on Monday 30th of June 2003, did you use your computer? Shane says yes. And did you access the internet? He says yes. You'll know that your computer was taken from the house by police officers. Yes. And you'll know that it was examined. Yes. I want just to show you a document from you just to see. Incomprehensible. It's production 199. It's a document from a company called Wanadu, and you'll probably understand that that is the company that used to be called FreeServe. Yes. Okay, and you'll see that on the front page it details your accounts, your account details. Yes. And if you look over onto the next page, you'll see that it lists the internet sessions that were used. Yeah. And top of the page is the list of session 30th of June of 2003, which is the day we're talking about. Yes. And it is the session commencing on at 16:53 and 53 seconds. Yes. Now, for practical purposes, we'll call that 5 to 5. Yes. And so we can see this document seems to vouch the proposition that you were on the internet by 5 to 5. Yes. And you would agree with that. Shane agrees. Okay, how long had you been in the house at that time? Shane says not very long. And if you look along the next column in the document, we'll see that the internet session ends at 17:16 and 17 seconds. Yes. So that's 16 minutes past 5. Yes. Okay. I want you to look at another document, please, with me. Production 167. And it is a report prepared by police officers who examined the computer, and I'm interested in looking at Appendix B. Could you? Appendix B for Bravo. B. And you'll see that there is a page that begins Appendix, just headed up Appendix B. Shane agrees. And then over there, there's a list of files. Yes. You'll know a little bit about computers, don't you? Yes. You'll need to go to the last page of this list of files with me, please, because that's where it starts and then it works its way backwards. Could you do that? Shane says yes. And could we put that on the screen, please? Now, you'll see that this is the information extracted from your computer. You've probably seen information like that before. Yes. I think your work used to be in connection with computers, didn't it? Now, Shane agrees, and I'll kind of pause for a second here. That's interesting in respect that some of the questions you'll see coming up, there's a certain amount of ignorance that Shane will show, but he does admit that, one of his thing, a job that he'd actually done, he'd worked in that field, so had an understanding there. Flip-flopping on certain things, which again you'll see when we get later in the questions, he understands and he doesn't understand. Right, and do we see the timing here taken from the computer for the first entry is 16:52 and 59 seconds. Yes. So it's very similar to the timing we looked at. Yes. Or a second or so different between the one we do document on this one, and we can see that it documents what the computer was doing, doesn't it? So they switched it on, it's starting to follow what the commands have been. Yes, of course, there by Shane. And it takes up to show and it takes us up to show that you went, for example, to a Google site. Yes. Is that your default internet search engine? No, that's the home page. The home page. Now, if you look up 2 or 3 lines from that, you'll see that the computer documentation records that a site called the Hun was visited. Shane agrees. Is that a site you know? Shane says yes. And it is a site that you sometimes visited. Yes. And then the computer documentation goes on to record the names of other images and sites that were recorded. He says yes. Now, that's how this document works. Yes. We need to understand a bit more about this, Mr. Mitchell. For example, what kind of site is the Hun? Shane says it's a directory of pornographic sites. Okay, does that in fact call itself something like the yellow pages of pornography? And Shane says yes. And if we were to try and understand what that means, it is a site that lists options available to the viewer. He says yes. And so, for example, does it list by description images that you can then view from the site? He says sometimes yes. Okay. And if you put your cursor over one of the items described, does it then bold up? I can't remember. Is that how it works? That you can put your cursor over one of the descriptions, click that, and then it takes you to that image. And Shane says yes. Any comments, guys, in the chat, or anything you want to say to this point? It kind of that starts to show, I can't remember, but he's a regular on the site. It's flip-flopping for me, but more of it to come. That sort of thing. So that's the sort of thing that happens. Although sometimes if you click one of them, it opens about 7 or 8 windows. Yes, okay. But if you have a selection on this Hun site, and he says yes. It gives you information about what there is available to see, yes. Okay, and should we understand that then that's what you did on accessing the computer this Monday afternoon? Yes. And then we can see as we look on through the list of files that Appendix B, that lists by reference the images and any other pages that you were looking at. You see that there's a nature of what that you see. That's the nature of the information. Yes, of those descriptions aren't seen on the page. We kind of bit there blacking out that sentence, unfortunately. I follow that. You mean these are not seen on the screen? And it says those words don't appear on the screen. No. But for example, the very bottom entry, 1655, ends with the letters JPG. Yes. Is that a JPEG image? That is a JPEG image, isn't it? Yes. And so that is a picture of something. Yes. And as you go up, the next one is also JPG. It's also an image. Yes. And as you go up, the next one is HTM. Yes. Is that another page rather than an image? Incomprehensible, and then yes. That's a page, okay, and then there will be another. That will be another image on that page. Is that the way it works? Shane agrees. And now we can see them listed as the JPEGs that follow. Yes, okay. So what we should understand is that you were browsing through pictures that were available by accessing the Hun site, and he says yes. And did that mean that Mr. Mitchell, that you were watching pornography on your computer that day? Yes. I'm going to stop right there, because what I want to say right now is a lot of the stories that come from Sandra Lean and Scott Forbes state that Shane was looking at car sites. Now that will come up in this chat, but just to put this here just so people understand, one of the biggest fallacies really is the idea that he was accidentally looking at porn. Now we can see by his own testimony here that it was intentional. You know, he went to a site that was called the Yellow Pages of Porn. So the idea that he was on car sites and there was images that were flashing up is just wrong. It's just a lie. And it's a lie that undermines Shane Mitchell's own testimony, because here he is right now saying that that's what he was doing. So there is no question that that is a lie. And anyone still touting that after reading transcripts or listening to this, you're lost. So carrying on. And that's just after returning home from work. And he says yes. Via Roswell, sorry, yes. I'm putting, that's the aliens again. Okay, now we can see that the internet session begins at, we've called it 5 to 5, correct. How soon would that be then after you got in the house? Quite soon. And of course there is now a record to identify that time, isn't there? And he says yes. We're not having to rely on recollection. No. Thank fuck. Okay, did your room have a lock on the door at the end of June 2003? And he says, I can't remember. Did there come a time when it did? And he says yes. Now, I think you've been asked about the question of this log before. And he says yes. If you think about it, did it have a lock by the end of June? Incomprehensible. Sorry. If you hang on a wee second, I'm trying to think. No, I don't think it did. Which, can we just stop again quickly? That's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? That there was a lock on the door after. Did it? Is that just me? I'll leave that one with you. And we'll carry on. No, alright. Now we've realised by this stage, Mr. Mitchell, that you gave a statement to the police on the 3rd of July and a statement on the 7th of July. And he said that's correct. We know now, because we've seen a record and you've told us that when you got home from work on Monday the 30th, you were watching pornography. And Shane agrees. Did you tell the police in either of the first two statements that you were watching pornography when you got home from work? Shane says no. change statements, guys. Okay, when was the first time that you told the police you'd been watching pornography when you returned home from work on Monday the 30th of June? Shane, it's incomprehensible. Well, we'll take your time then, and we'll take your time then, and maybe I can help you. It was during the last interview I gave, but I don't remember when it happened or anyone with you. No. Now, Mr. Mitchell, you'll understand that what we're dealing with today is a very important matter. Yes. So, this is where we are, yes, absolutely. And I hope you'll accept from me that I've got no desire to embarrass you or to make you feel in any way humiliated. Do you follow that? Yes. But there are certain things that I need to ask you, and I need you to help me with them. Yes. And what I need you to ask you next is, were you doing anything else besides watching pornography? And he says, I can't remember. Very coy. Well, I'll need to get you to help me with that. Worded wrong. And let's start this way. You remember that you told me on Monday that you went to the Procurator Fiscal's office. Nailed it. I think it was in September. Yes. And you told me that the Procurator... See, I've done it there as well. Procurator, and I was actually trying to be cheeky. Procurator Fiscal, the truth. Yes. Okay, well, I need... See, that's just totally threw me off. Well, I need you to think back to that then to see if that helps. But I'm also going to have to reinforce how important this is, Mr. Mitchell. And I want you to look with me at Productions number 1. Now, you don't need to open that for me at the moment. You'll see that it's a booklet. Do you see that? Yes. I don't suppose you've ever seen that before, have you? And he says, no, I don't think so. Okay. It contains photographs, Mr. Mitchell, that were taken at the Rowansteig path after the body of Jodi Jones had been found there. Do you follow me? Yes. Now I want you to look at the photograph N in the booklet. Would you do that? Right. Now I'm not surprised to see your reaction there, Mr. Mitchell, but I did see it. So essentially, just really breaking that down, he's, having Shane look at photos of the crime scene, and I imagine Jodi Jones' body, which would take anybody back. So, yeah, I mean, he goes on to say, you look a bit horrified there, and you looked away from it, didn't you? And he says yes, which anybody would. No matter where I stand on Shane's flip-flopping with memory, that would affect you. But again, I understand at the end of the day the seriousness to kind of need to... I think, for me, and I'll put this here, I think Shane, Sandra Lean does kind of look at the testimony of Janine Jones and say that she tried to tell the truth, in her words. I think it's more the case for Shane. And I think I think that kind of helped him get there, to be fair. Not that it's something I wouldn't have thought of using, but I am not in any way a legal expert, nor do I claim to be, like some other people. So moving on from that and carrying on here. Okay, look on with me at photograph V for Victor. Can I have a wee break for a minute, please? Understandable. By the court, you can sit down for a moment. Examination in chief continued by the Lord Advocate Depute. That'll be Alan Turnbull again. Are you all right, Mr. Mitchell? Can you look with me at photograph V for Victor? Right. And W. Okay. And X and AA. Right. Now, they're not pleasant, these, Mr. Mitchell. I know that. Close the book. The reason I've asked you to look at those is so you can appreciate what we're dealing with here. Do you understand that? He says yes. And having seen that, Mr. Mitchell, you'll appreciate that can't let embarrassment stand in the way of getting to the bottom of this. You'll follow that? Yes. You'll follow that, don't you? Yes. So I come back to my question, Mr. Mitchell, and I'm asking you, please, just to answer that regardless, were you doing anything else besides watching the pornography? And Shane at that time admits, I think I was masturbating. Having a Google. Okay, I can't remember the events of that day very well. It was a very long time ago. Okay, and what's happened since then? I've been very stressed. Well, I understand that. Not that... yeah, but that's not what you'd think was happening. Yes. No, but that's what you'd think was happening. So he thought, I'm getting confused again. So he thought he was having a wee ham shank. Carrying on. Okay, well, I'm grateful to you for that. How can we move on, please? And let me ask you something a little different. Now can we move on? And now and how always get mixed up as well. What time did your mother normally finish her work? About 5 o'clock. So we've moved on for the porn. We'll just kind of stop there and have we talk about that. Obviously it'll be discussed a little bit more, but really then we have a good time frame for not only the fact that Shane is in the house, but that there is no use of the house phone or anything like that, because we've spoke about in videos before. At the time it wasn't possible. You could only have the one dominant line, and we'll go on to speak a wee bit more about the conditions of the house as well whilst it was doing that. But moving on to that, we're trying to get a grip of Corinne's movements. So again, we'll just go back to the start of that. So I'm grateful to you for that. Now can we move on, please? And let me ask you something a little different. What time did your mother normally finish her work? About 5 o'clock. Right. And how did she get home? By car? Was it far from her business to, and then the address? It was about 5 minutes by car. Okay, which part of the house was your bedroom located in? The front window. So was that the area that would overlook the front garden? Yes. And the driveway? Yes. Okay. By the court, was that the window we saw in the photograph we looked at earlier? No, it's the window, incomprehensible tree. The right hand of the two windows looking from the tree. Hang on 2 seconds, what picture is it? 3. It's to the right of the window, you can see the tree. Examination in chief continued by the Lord Advocate Depute. From your bedroom, would you have been able to hear a car arriving and drawing up in the driveway if the window was open? Okay. Would you... Well, sorry, Shane said if the window was open. Okay, would you be able to hear a car door closing, for example? Yes. No, that's him that said. Yeah, that's... of course, on June of 2003, Luke was at school. Yes. And what time did he finish school, do you know? I don't know. Do you know roughly, even? Between 3 and half 4. At some point. Really? That vague? Okay, what time did he normally get home from school, do you know? He said he doesn't know. Okay, well, let's look at from another way. It was St David's High School, I think he went to, wasn't it? Yes. And did he tend to walk home from school? I don't know. You don't know. Sometimes he walked, sometimes he got a lift. Okay. Would you expect him to be home by 5? Yes. Okay, now if we bring that information together, then we see that your mother worked and would normally work until 5 o'clock. Would that be right? Yes. And would be home a little after that, perhaps. Yes. Okay. The Luke would be at school, and let's assume his school finishes at about 3:45. Yes. He'd be home after that. That's right. That must be so, mustn't it? He'd be home after the finishing time for the school. If he finishes at 3:45, he'd probably be home about 4. Safe assumption. Right. And certainly you would expect him to be home by 5. Yes. Okay, so if you arrived home about 5 to 5 on Monday afternoon, where would you expect your mother to be at that time? Pardon. If you arrived home at 5 to 5, yes, on a Monday afternoon, she'd be at work, says Shane. Your mum would still be at work, right. And where would you expect Luke to be? Either in the house or out with his friends.
Right, seems safe. Do you still have the booklet of photographs showing your house before Mr. Mitchell? Shane agrees. And oh, I've lost where I was there. It's 3, I think. Oh, whatever. Yes. Do you have that? Yes. If you look with me at the photograph C, that shows a view taken from the front door with the front door open. Yes. You can see into the hallway and the beginning of the stairs that go up to the beginning of the stairs that go up the stairs. Yes. The next photograph is photograph D. Would you have a look at this one? Right. That's looking back to the front, inside of the front door. Yes. And we see another wooden door is there. Right. And that's the door to the living room. Yes. And in photograph, is that I believe? Yes. We see a view taken from the living room itself. Yes. And so if you come in the living room door, that's the view. And you get that, yeah. And we're looking up towards the dining room in that view, aren't we? Yes. And do you see in the archway at the left hand side, you can just catch sight of a police officer in a white suit? Yes. Is the kitchen just off to the left beside him? Yes. If you came home on the Monday evening about, let's say, just before 5 to 5, and you saw anyone in the living room, what would you have realised that someone would have been in? Okay, now we've discussed this a minute or two ago, but did I understand you to say that Luke quite often made the tea? And he said yes. Okay, and where would you do that? In the kitchen. Alright, so where would you have expected Luke to have been if he was in the house? And he says in the kitchen. Okay, if when you come home on the Monday afternoon, round about 5 to 5, just before 5 to 5, and if you had looked in the living room and you'd seen no one, but you'd heard music coming from the CD player in the dining room, what would you have thought? And he said that someone was in. Okay, did you look at the living room and look in the living room when you came back that day? Shane says that I can't remember, I think I just shouted hello. Okay, well I suppose that there are a range of things that one might do when we go home. Shouting hello is one of them. Correct. Okay, of course, whether or not you'd be interested in seeing if anyone else was in might depend on what you had in mind doing, might it? And he says yes. Okay, now we know as a matter of fact that you did do what you did do when you got in. You've just taken us through that. And he says yes. So with that in mind, I know it's a long time ago, but I'm going to ask you just to try with me and see if you can remember whether you looked into the living room when you got home. And he says that he can't remember. Okay, we'll just maybe come back to that in a minute, please, Mr. Mitchell, but let's move on for a moment. In order to get to your bedroom, obviously you have to go upstairs, and Shane says yes. And as you do go up the stairs towards your bedroom, you pass Luke's bedroom at the top of the stairs, don't you? He says yes, because his is just at the top, or just at the top as you get to the landing on the left. Yes. Okay, if you'd heard music playing from his room as you passed it, if you had heard music playing from his room as you passed it, yes, what would you have thought? I would have thought that he was in. Okay, once you were in the bedroom, if you had heard music coming from down the stairs, what would you have thought? That he was downstairs. Right, did you hear music coming from the dining room on that afternoon? I don't think so. Did you hear music coming from Luke's room in that afternoon? No, I don't think so. This will all tie into other things as well, obviously, but just clarifying here with Shane, he didn't hear anything when he got home. Okay, if you were in your bedroom and you heard the sound of somebody clattering around downstairs in the kitchen and the dining room, what would you have, over the pages, thought? Someone was making dinner. Of course, the defence being that Luke was mashing tatties when Corinne Mitchell got home. So, just clarifying there that Shane would have thought if he'd heard noise, the dinner was being made. Right, so whether you can remember looking into the living room or not at the moment, what we do know is that when you when you got to your bedroom, we do know what you did when you got to your bedroom. He says yes. Okay. When we looked at a list of sites which were accessed, Mr. Mitchell, you were good enough to tell us that they were pornographic sites, but the description of some of them is quite revealing as well, isn't it? Yes. I don't need to take up your time with that, but taking it shortly, there are pretty graphic images which are available on these sites, aren't they? And he says, yes. And if you look at the report before you, production 167, you can see that Appendix C, there is some of the images reproduced. He agrees. And there are some of the images that you were viewing during the session, aren't they? And he says yes. Session's an odd choice of words, is it not? Okay, the last one was viewed at a different time though. We'll come to that. But I'm thinking about the ones with showing the naked women and the ones with men and women engaged together. And he says yes. And they're pretty graphic, aren't they? Yes. Now, would you have been content to have watched that sort of pornography as someone else within the house? Shane says only occasionally. Now, what does that mean? If I thought that they wouldn't be coming upstairs. Understandably so. You carry on, Alan Turnbull carries on. Right, would you have been content to watch that sort of pornography in your room without a lock on the door and to have masturbated if you thought there was someone else in the house? And he says no. Okay, accordingly, on that afternoon at about 5 to 5, as you were accessing these sites, who did you think was in the house? And he says no one at that time. Now, the internet session ran from, we'll say, 5 to 5 to 16 minutes past 5, correct? And during that time, we know that the pornographic sites were accessed, and they were the first sites that were accessed. Yes, only until about 5 past 5 though. Yes, I follow that. But that's what I'm coming to ask you about. Did you access any other sites apart from pornographic sites? Shane says he did. What sites were these? Car-related sites. Okay, that's something else that you had an interest in, and Shane says yes. Okay, can I understand how this works, though, please, Mr. Mitchell? As you start from the Hun site, you can access images that are available by clicking on descriptions listed on the Hun site. He says yes. And then they bring those images up. And if you want another image, what do you then do? What do you mean? Well, you started at your Hun site, you see a list of images that are available by description, you decide that you want to view one of them, you can click on the description, it comes up, up comes the image. Let's say you want to view another one of those that are listed by description on the Hun site. And he says the Hun site would still be open. Right. And you can go, and it's incomprehensible, and so you can go back to the list and it's still there. And he says yes, and you can click on a different description, yes, and it comes up with a different image, yes. If you do that, what happens to the first image you've selected? Other window. But imagine that it opens another window, so I'm going to kind of slot that in there. Right. And stored in your temporary internet files. Right, so you can choose still to look at it. And he says yes. Right, and as you've got to the stage where you wanted to look at the car related site, Shane agrees. Were the porn sites still open? No, they were closed down. Carrying on. Well, I'd like you to look at that with me, but before we do, I want you to tell me why you say that. Why would you have closed the porn sites? He says because if you have too many windows open at the same time, it gets hard to manage them all. I know that from editing, but it's probably because you were finished what you were doing, really. But no, actually, because carrying on. Sorry, Alan Turnbull says, yes, what makes you think that by the time you got to the car site, you had too many sites open on the window, too many windows open rather? And he says, just looking at this records, there is quite a lot of pages being opened. And he says, yes, but what makes you think there would be too many by then? And he says, just a feeling I've got. Was that just a guess? And he says, yes. It seemed to be something that came very quickly to you. And he says, what do you mean? Just what I say. You seem to have come to that guess very quickly. Well, I don't look at porn and look at car sites at the same time. I look at them one at a time, sorry. So, okay, well, let's look at the description list in the Appendix B, and it may be that we have to work our way all the way through this to do it, but it may not be difficult to do that. Can you put the first page on the screen, please? So, kind of taking a second away here, just want to say, we will recap a lot of this when it comes into the legal argument. We'll just put up the screenshots for the legal argument, so bear with me because there's a lot to kind of catch up here. Even though this is only prosecution, there's still a lot of reading, so bear with me on this one and we'll get through what is another, I believe, 17 pages before the legal argument comes in, and we'll just kind of summarise that. So Lord Nimmo Smith says, do you believe do you mean the first page chronologically? The Advocate Depute, I do, my lord, yes. Nimmo Smith, yes, that's the last page in the bundle. It's continued, and we can see there, just as we did when we first looked at this, that you're into the Hun site at about 16:54 and 29 seconds. And he says correct. And we can see what happens after that, and we can see at the top of the page a file entry that ends in the letters HTM, correct? And that's the page, isn't it? Yes. So that's a page that you've gone to, and he says yes, from the Hun site, correct? And there will be images on that site, won't there? Yes. And you can see just by the description of it, correct? We go chronologically to the next page at the bottom of the pages, chronologically where we start. You see that? And he says yes. And the records tells us that these images were viewed JPEGs. He says correct. And then third up, the next thing that happens is another page is opened. Shane agrees. And another page which is again the Hun, correct, Shane says. And then after that, the number of images, and he says yes. You'll see that in those images, they go quite a way off the page. Yes. These will be images that aren't images from the page that we've just opened. Yes. So these will be pornographic images, and Shane agrees. Well, then get up to another page with the same name, Venus 1. And he says, I can't. 10. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down from the top. Yes. And that's a page, isn't it? Because there's an HTM. It must be, yes. And there are some images, correct? 2 images, JPEG, you see that? Yes. But that's still pornographic images, isn't it? I don't know. Well, look at the name of the page, Venus, right? What do you think? It must be. I don't know them off by heart. You'd hope no.
No, I understand that. And then the next one up, the next page with the HTM, it's 3 down from the top, and it's X-Ray Tango Charlie Bravo Bravo Whiskey Charlie Alpha Mike Delta India 1, is that, I believe? And Shane agrees. Do you see that? Yes. Do you know what that is? Probably the same. Right. It's another page, and at the top, another page. Do you see that? The top of the document? Yes. And then if we go over chronologically to the next page, we're at 1657.
we get into images at the bottom of that page, which include, as part of the description, IMG image, that'll be 3, and large JPEG. Do you see that? Yes. And we can see that those going up that page, there are pornographic images, aren't there? And Shane agrees. It says here, we get to another page then, and then we move on to some images. IMG member with numbers, large JPEG. Do you see that? Shane says yes. Alan Turnbull goes on, now what are they? They're images. Yeah. They're not some sort of club that you've accessed. They're not some sort of club that you've accessed, aren't they? That you're a member of. He says, I don't know. Well, think about it. Because, you see, member can mean a member of different things. Shane agrees with that. He says, yes, one thing it can mean is a member of a club. Shane says, right. It can mean other things too, can't it? Yes. And these things are still pornographic images, aren't they? And he says, I don't know. Well, and Shane goes on to say they must be. They're on a pornographic site, aye. But I can't tell what those pictures are by just looking at the title. Alan Turnbull says, no, but you know something about this, you see, Mr. Mitchell, because not only were you the person that was activating the computer, you've done it before, and you do know that about computers. Shane agrees and says, right. So can you help me with this, I think? So you can help me with this, I think, can you? And he says, yes. And it's right, isn't it, that all the way up here we're looking at images which are pornographic, and Shane agrees. All the way to the top of that page, and Shane says, okay. And if we then look onto the next page, 1658 is the time at the bottom of the page. We're looking at a whole range of different images described by numbers and letters. Yes. And we haven't yet got to the page reference which is anything to do with cars, have we? And he says no. On to the next page then, please. And the time at the bottom of this page is 1604. Do you see that? Shane says yes. The two images at the bottom are images which are associated with the previous page that you've opened. Aha. And the previous page of this transaction that we're looking at. This is correct. So the first two are still pornographic images. Yes. And then we come to an entry show thread PHP. Shane says yes. Do you see that? Yes. And what show thread? What's a show thread? It's a term used on internet forums. And what's it to do with? It's to do with opening a thread in the browser. Right. And where would it be? Where would it take you? To the forum, to a particular thread. Like people on here will be on forums, they'll know how that works. Carrying on, however. And what's the subject matter of that thread? I don't know, whatever the thread is. Okay, did you use in your favourites list a show thread link to take you to the car sites? And it says I used them to take me to the index. Okay, and from their index, could you then go to car sites? It says yes. Now this show thread link, which is third up from the bottom, is something different from what we've been looking at up until this point. Because up until this point, we'd been looking at JPEG images, so pictures from pages. And he says yes. So you've done something else when you get to show for it. What? Haven't you? And he says yes. So you've gone somewhere else. Yes. Okay, but you see, the very next entry is 4 seconds later, and it's another JPEG image. You see that? So Shane says yes. But it's not just any old JPEG. You can see that it's linked to some of the other ones that we were looking at. Yes. And so by the time that we get here, do you know what we're looking at? Where? This number 10, one JPEG. Yes. What is that? And he says it's one of the pictures from the pornographic sites. The sites in the list are above them, and the list would have actually been downloaded to the computer
not when I've requested them. He says, I follow that. That's what's joined, and that's joined the point I'm coming to, you see. Because if there are pornographic images described in the list at a point after you've accessed the car sites, and he says, yes, what would that tell you? Nothing. It could be that the window was still open while the car site was open. But he was supposed to have closed them all, remember, because there was too many windows open and he was finished what he was doing. But anyway, yeah. It doesn't mean that they've asked to download any more. So he says, Donald Turnbull says, no, all right. But it does mean, this is from Shane, that there is that time that it's taken to arrive. Alan Turnbull says, I follow that. They've arrived after, but you can see that very shortly after, a few seconds after that, they stopped arriving. And again, Alan Turnbull says, I follow that. But what it means, doesn't it, that the pornographic site has not been closed. The window for the other pornographic site has not been closed. It doesn't mean necessarily that you'd be looking at it, but it's not been closed. Shane replies, well, it could mean it's been closed about 7 or 8 seconds after accessing the car site. That's questionable. And so Alan Turnbull carries on, yeah, but not at the time of accessing the car site, not at the exact second, no. Okay, now as you rightly point out, Mr. Mitchell, this list ends at about 1706, doesn't it? He says yes. And the last two entries on the list are references to saving a picture, aren't they? Yes. And so the last piece of internet activity that's recorded, the third last entry, yes. Third from the top of the page, yes. And that's 1706 and 2 seconds, yes. Have you seen this list before? Shane says he has once, yes. When was that? When I was having my precognition by Jill Waugh, I think that's pronounced. Is that your brother's solicitor? So Luke's solicitor. And Shane agrees. Okay, when was that? I can't remember. A couple of months ago, I think. Okay, now the internet session we see continued until 1716. We see that from the Wanna-Do record, and Shane agrees. And there's no apparent internet activity after 1706. Shane agrees again. He says, right, well, that could be down to a difference in the clocks between the Wanna-Do time and the time on my computer, according to Shane, which I don't know if that would be in official records. I don't know if that would necessarily be the case, because your system might... Anyway, carrying on. Okay, which is not guaranteed to be accurate. Accurately updated, I think that'd be. So he says, Alan Turnbull says, I follow that. What I'm wondering is whether you know what you were doing, say, between 1706 and 1716. Shane says, I don't know, probably washing up in the bathroom or going to the toilet or something. Which, interestingly enough, if you think about it, means again that he's showing that there is no music in the kitchen or the dining room or indeed Luke's bedroom. If that's the case that Shane would be doing that, then he would be hearing other movement in the house, which I'm sure would take him back, considering he's just tried to have a wee sly shot he sold there. Anyway, carrying on. Okay, there is something else that I want you to look at then with me. Would you look at the production number 76 and production number 77? And let's put these on the screen, please. These are stills taken from a CCTV camera in the morning, noon and night shop. Do you know where that is? Shane says yes. It's not far from your house, really, is it? No, it's about 2 minutes away, says Shane. Okay, and I think that's your mother at the counter, isn't it? Just behind the young boy. Shane says yes, it looks like her. And you can see the time there, 1709. Yes. And look at the next one for me, please. By this stage, the time is 1710 and 24 seconds. Shane agrees. And it looks as though your mother is leaving the shop. And he says, right. Now, that's a record shows us where she was at the time. We can see that, yes. And how long would it take for her to drive home from the morning, noon and night shop? And he says about 2 minutes. So she'll be home sometime around about 12 minutes or so past 5. Yes. Okay, be home by 1:15, would you say? Would that be a reasonable way of looking at it? And he says by 1:15, yes, aye.
By 1:15, the car would be in the drive, she would be out the car and coming into the house, or even in the house. Would that be right? And Shane agrees. Now, your internet session terminated at 16 minutes past 5. Shane says correct. Was it terminated at 16 minutes past? Why was it terminated? And Shane says he doesn't know. He asks, did you terminate it? He says probably. Why did you say probably? I can't remember that far back. Exact circumstances. Well, you would hope, regardless. Seem to remember a lot of other things though. So, well, you know a lot more than about computers than I do, having worked with them. But I think I understand that if you're on the internet, you can bring a session to an end. He says yes. By clicking on the cross in the corner of the window. Is that right? He says no. Okay, well, you can disconnect by using your mouse to click. Yes. You go to the taskbar, right click your connection and click disconnect. Dial-up internet, guys. Remember that. Okay, now if you did that at 60 minutes past 5, that would terminate the session, wouldn't it? He says yes. Moving on here. Well, if you didn't do it, how else could the session be terminated? And it says someone could have picked up the phone, which would discontinue the session and switch the computer off, which would have disconnected the session without touching the mouse. So like I've said before, obviously the one dominant line can't operate two at the same time, showing there was no phone calls made whilst Shane was on the internet up to that point that he is aware, because he was having a little ham shank. So it says, sometimes an error, that connection can cause it to disconnect. Okay, but in the situation I probably either disconnected it or switched the computer off. Alan Turnbull says, okay, if you're on the internet, can somebody use the phone? He says no. Okay, so how would picking up the phone disconnect the internet session? Because the internet is connected via the phone. If you pick up the phone, it stops the flow of data, which is, and most of the time it can't recover from that, and it hangs up on itself. And he says, okay, but probably, as you say, you would have either disconnected or switched off the computer. And Shane says yes. Okay, I'm wondering, Mr. Mitchell, if there is any connection between the time of disconnection and the fact that your mother would have been in the house by around about 5:15. Was there any connection there? Shane says, I don't recall. There might have been that I switched off and the computer to go down and see her. Okay. I was finished, I believe. I was finished what I was doing before she got home. Well, hope you want to do it as you walk down the stairs. He says, okay, now that you, after terminating the session, what did you do? Shane says, I can't remember exactly. Well, did you go downstairs, for example? I'd have went to the bathroom at some point and then went down the stairs. Yeah. Now, you told me just a little while ago that if the window was open, you could hear the car drawing up. You would hear the door closing, presumably. You would hear someone coming in the front door, would you? And Shane agrees. So, should we take it then that you were aware of your mother coming back? And he says yes. Now, that would be the first of her coming in from her work. Yes. She could not know what you'd been doing, could she? No. No, I mean, she couldn't have known as she came in the front door that you were what you were watching on your computer upstairs, could she? And he says no. So, just say, for example, if you had been on a porn site as she came in, she couldn't have known that. No. Nor could she have known that it was undoubtedly the content of the sites that you were viewing when you first started the computer. Says no. Okay, and equally, if you'd been masturbating, she couldn't have possibly have known that. And he says no. He says, okay, did you tell her any of these things? And he says no. Did your mother call to you when she came in the house? Shane says, I can't remember exactly what happened when she came in the house. He says, well, I want to ask you to look at something with me then. And you see, if it reminds you. You remember you told me that you were interviewed on the 14th of April by the police? And he says, yes. And he says, and this was an interview that was conducted on tape, wasn't it? He says, yes. He says, I want you to have a look at the transcript of the tape recorded interview with me. Just bear with me till I get the production number. It's a production number 60, please. I want you to look at page 109 of that with me. He says, page what, sorry? So 109, clarifying there, 109. And this is a question and answer format, you'll see. You see that. Now, the very last answer at the bottom of the page is an answer given by you. He says, correct. You understand that? Yes. Okay, now, what it says, and kind of this is where we kind of need to stop here. Yes. This is kind of where the legal argument comes in. So, there is a particular bit of this that I do want to read, but I don't want to go through it all. So, let's kind of just take a second, summarise here, seeing as it's going to be a long video, put a lot of summary here, and then we'll kind of let the legal argument play in the background. If you guys want to have a quick read of that, just have a little pause, read through it, but I'll summarise essentially what we're talking about whilst before I get into my thoughts on this in general. So yeah, let's start that. Just to kind of break it down here though, well, don't for a moment, Mr. Finlay here. Well, don't for a moment, please, Advocate Deputy, my lord, if the content of this is to be referred to at this stage, a point arises. So, Lord Nimmo-Smith says, this will obviously require discussion in that case then, Advocate Deputy. Alan Turnbull believes, he said, I think so, by the court. Could you please leave us while this discussion takes place? So at this point, at 14:46 and 16 seconds, the jury and the witness left court. So as I say, let's have a wee talk about what's happened so far, summarise a couple of things, and just let this legal argument play out, and we'll go through that as well quickly. So I do want to, however, cover the kind of argument from Donald Finlay about the evidence coming in, the use of Shane Mitchell's interview, just to kind of show what that was about, quickly summarise, go through what we've done so far, and then bash on with this. We've got another 40 pages to go, and then that's us. That puts it here. I know this has been a long one, guys, but we can build on this, and this is kind of the building blocks really, in terms of where we go for here. Next week, when we look at the defence question for Shane, I will be able to compare it to some of the stuff we've looked at today, some of the stuff that's been said in podcasts and in the media, and so next week's episode will be more of a total summarisation, just because with Shane Mitchell and Corinne Mitchell, they're both very lengthy, so those have to break into what you would call two parts. The rest can be dealt with, if not by themselves, actually with another one involved due to the length of the actual transcript itself. As I said, for example, Shane's is over 270 odd pages. So with this then, Mr. Finlay said, my lord, I object to the use of this tape recorded interview transcript and the contents thereof on the basis that it was unfairly obtained. My lord has already heard in relation to an earlier interview the authorities canvassed, and I don't mean to rehearse them again. It goes on. Now, really, when you boil down to it, it's actually on the kind of next page. There is an argument from Mr. Finlay where he says the principal ground of objection is this, is that the interview is, in my submission, a sham or a pretense by the police, and it was not, in my submission, an interview of Shane Mitchell at all, to a significant degree, in relation to an attempt to him to pervert the course of justice. What it was an attempt by the police, by a variety of means, to secure evidence against his brother, Luke. So a lot of the argument from Donald Finlay is essentially, it was improperly gathered and with ulterior motives. Now, as I say, the argument itself falls apart in the sense that Lord Nimmo-Smith, Alan Turnbull argues the case. Lord Nimmo-Smith agrees that, treated as suspect and treated as a witness, it has no bearing on, the validity of the statement itself, and still would be used neither way.
However, the idea that, personally, the idea that the argument could be it was used to gather evidence against Luke, and that being the reason we can't use it, is ridiculous, given that any police interview is, an attempt to gather evidence, no matter who the line of questioning is towards, or, how it's gathered at the time, under what pretense. So I admire Mr. Findlay for the actual argument himself and trying to get it quashed, but the reality is any such interview could have been used. Mr. Findlay could have used the same in terms of anyone from the Jones side of the family if he'd wanted to use those. So the argument doesn't stand up on that basis. I will cover a little bit about the interview itself, because Donald Findlay does go on to question Shane whilst on the stand about that. And that's something that we'll cover next week, but there's a lot to go into with that, in my opinion. But this, and honestly, if Donald Findlay hadn't got the evidence in, I don't know if he would have had a lot to speak about to Shane when he was on the stand, in all honesty, using that to his advantage to try and dismiss everything else, which is simple deflection, but used to it. So, as I say, that's the argument in itself. I'll put it up so we can, you can look through it. As I say, no offence, but if you could just pause it, have a quick read, because I don't want to keep on going with this. This one's long enough as it is, and we're still a fair little chunk to go. So let's summarise what we've looked at so far and then finish this off. So, as I say, although next week's video will be able to look at this more as a whole and kind of go over everything, I do want to put a little bit in here, kind of summarising what I think of the prosecution's questions in terms of how Shane dealt with them, etc. So, really what I would say, and it becomes, I think it's evident in what we've read and what we will go on to read to finish this off, is Shane kind of, how can I put it, he takes responsibility and doesn't take responsibility depending on how it makes him look, in my opinion. And it comes to the same when it comes to memory as well. In terms of something that might be deemed negative, it does seem that that's when there is a problem with memory. For example, knowing about computers, being very precise about the idea that, it could be 7 or 8 seconds after we close a window, but being so unsure about how the Hun site works in terms of visually, when we put the cursor over this, does it make it big? Oh, I don't know. But so much knowledge on the things that, we could argue against. In terms of if it was anything that was going to make him look in a negative manner, then he would have an answer. For example, as I say, the closing of the window within 7 or 8 seconds. So, for me, Shane's memory tends to go as he needs it. And thing in terms of as well the responsibility, it was we'll go on to talk about it here in terms of the interview that he had, where the police brought him in for questioning and he was charged. And the one with Michelle Lindsay as well, there's a lot of kind of focus on the fact that it was done improperly, in their opinion. Again, this idea that, asking someone questions in relation to such a crime can be deemed as a negative, needing an answer. We'll go on to speak about that, and, require an answer and pushing for an answer can be deemed as negative, whilst they're in court pushing for an answer is somewhat hypocritical. But Donald Findlay will use that in his question. I won't go into too much here, but he will use that in his questioning to kind of dismiss a lot of things. What we really do need to look at from the whole thing, which is evident from what we've spoke about before, and what we'll go on to speak about, is Shane not placing Luke at the home during the time when Luke said he was there, or indeed Luke not placing Shane. We'll go into all that. So that's the most important thing that we can take from the prosecution. I think Alan Turnbull made a really good effort to show that Shane was rather untrustworthy in terms of what he had decided was happening and how everything had changed. And again, I think he did quite a good job as well of showing that Shane was manipulated by his mum. and by the whole situation in terms of dates, remembrance, everything else. What to do, again, going back to memory, remembering, what he done to help his friend, remembering, when he left to go, roughly when he left to go home, speaking to his sister, using the house phone, what he was there to do, but then can't remember if his brother was in the kitchen. So you have to wonder where the memory is lost and where he chooses to lose it so that he doesn't have to answer to other questions. That's where I go with that one. But for now, as I say, put your comments down below what you think. Speak about it in the chat, I'm sure you have been as well. Let's get on with the last little bit of this, because we're going to be well over 2 hours now with this, and then we'll do a little wrap up at the end. But let's get on with the last 40 pages or so of this questioning from Alan Turnbull. So now we've got the legal argument out of the way and a little summarisation of this. Let's just actually get through the last 40 pages so of the actual questioning from Alan Turnbull QC to Shane Mitchell, and we'll do a quick wrap up at the end. And next week we'll get on to the defence from Donald Findlay, and we'll be able to kind of look back at what we've discussed in this very long video. Thank you for anyone that's managed to get through all this. It's a slog me getting through it, and I'm the one doing it, so I'd hate to think what it's like to listen. So at 16:08 and 50 seconds, the jury and the witness returned to the court after the legal argument. So carrying on from there, Lord Nimmo Smith. I'm afraid you've had to wait for a bit, ladies and gentlemen, but I've now given my decision on Mr. Findlay's objection, and the evidence will proceed, and we'll have to make the best use we can of the remaining 20 minutes this afternoon. So, by the court, I've dealt with the matter that was raised, Mr. Mitchell, and we'll continue with your evidence, Advocate Deputy. So, examination in chief from the Advocate Deputy Alan Turnbull. Now, Mr. Mitchell, you remember I was asking you about whether your mother called out when you came in, and he says yes. He says, I think you explained to me that you couldn't remember, and Shane agrees. Well, I want you to look with me at production. I asked you, at the production I asked you to have, is it 67, by the court, number 60. So number 60 there. Then he continues, thank you, and to page 109, which is where we were. And Shane says yes. And do you see that it's a question and answer format, and the bottom of the page there is an answer from you to a question you were asked? And he says yes. Okay, and it includes other words. I heard my mum shouting, dinner is ready, and I got a fright. And he says yes. Alright. No, I think that's supposed to be now. That's what you said to the police, isn't it? And he says yes. Right. Did you hear your mum shouting, dinner is ready? I must have done. Well, if that happened, where were you when she called out? And she's probably in my bedroom or in the bathroom. There is another matter that I want to ask you to have a look at with me while we have this transcript before us. Remember I asked you before what you would have thought if you'd looked in the living room and saw someone there. Remember I asked you that just a wee while ago. Shane says yes. And you explained to me that obviously you would have realised that you weren't alone. He says yes. There was someone in the house, and I also asked you what you would have thought if you'd gone into the living room and saw nobody but heard the music playing. You remember that? And he said yes. And I asked you what you would have realised in that situation. And again, you told me that you would have realised that you weren't alone in the house. Shane agrees. Okay, and if I asked you if you did look in the living room when you went into the house, do you remember? He says yes. And again, I think you said to me that you couldn't remember if you looked in. And he says yes. If you look with me please at the page 113 of the transcripts, and again towards the bottom of that page, you'll see that you were being asked questions about what she did when she got in the house. He says, you pointed out that the police, that sometimes your family left the front door unlocked. And he says, yes. And then, okay, and the policeman said to you, right, so you've gone in, so you've got to an unlocked door. What did you do? Can you read the answer? Shane reads, popped my head into the living room. So you popped your head into the living room? Yes. Okay, and of course that's a reasonably ordinary thing to do when you go into a house, isn't it? He says, yes. Were you telling the police the truth at that point of the interview? He says, I must have been. And does it follow then that when you were being interviewed on April of last year, you had a recollection of popping your head into the living room when you went in? And he says, I must have done, yes. You see how this doesn't really all make sense together? He says, well, you see, the next question is, did you see anyone? Over the page, answer, I don't remember, I don't think so. Do you see that? And Shane agrees again. Well, we can draw this together a little more now, Mr. Mitchell. Think back to the afternoon of 30th of June 2003. We know that you got to your house a little before 5 to 5. We've seen that, haven't we? And he says yes. And we know that after you went into the house, you entered your bedroom and you put the computer on. And he agrees again. But thinking back to it now, did you pop your head into the living room? Did you shout anything? Did you see if there was anyone else in the house? And he says, I can't recall. Good Scottish there, can't recall. Okay, well, let's look at it a slightly different way then. We know that you did go into the house, yes. We know that you did go upstairs, and we know that you did switch on the computer. And he says yes. We also know that you told us that you were watching pornography, and we've discussed that. And he says yes again. Now, would you have done that without checking to see if there was anyone in the house? And he says no. Okay, so it follows then, and doesn't it, that you would have checked to see if there was anyone else in the house? And he says yes. And how would you do that? How would you check to see if there was anyone in? Either by calling or ken in through. I would have said hello. I would have called through. I can't remember if I popped my head in or not. Okay, but it looks as though you remember doing that when you were speaking to the police, which is odd. Shane says, it must have been, yes. Okay, and of course if you heard music, you would have known you weren't alone. And he says yes. Did you hear music? I don't think so. No, I don't recall hearing any music. Now, if you had, you would have known that you weren't alone. Yes. Okay, do we come then to where we were just a wee while ago, which is this. When you were on your computer and accessed the pornographic sites, you thought the house was empty. Shane agrees again. So just reiterating this point, Shane thought he was alone when he was masturbating in his bedroom. So Donald Finlay, next week we'll see, he tries to kind of dismiss all this, but we'll go through it all at that time because it'll make a lot more sense now that we've got this in place. So carrying on. But of course, not just because that thought popped into your head from nowhere, but because of the fact that you would have made some kind of inquiry. And he says yes. Okay, one other question, please, about the internet session, Mr. Mitchell. Did your program have a facility to automatically disconnect after a period of idleness? He says, I don't know. It has that facility, but I don't know if it was activated or not. Okay, but in your experience, then, did the computer terminate an internet session if there was a period of idleness? He says, sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. What was the period? Sorry. The period was terminated by the service provider rather than terminated by my computer. Well, I wonder how that works, because would the computer not require to read a program in order to know whether to terminate a particular function or not? He says, I don't know about that. not that great knowledge of computers that he had at the start of this chat, really, has he? Okay. Well, what does it What does it come to? Do you think your program, your FreeServe program, or your computer had an automatic disengaging facility? It had the facility, but I don't know if it was switched on or not. Okay, and do you know what the timescale would have been if it was switched on? Shane says, I don't know. Incomprehensible. Facility on my computer, but from the service provider, I think it's 2 hours. Okay, and you see, if there was a program instructing your computer to terminate after a particular period of idleness, then that would have been have to be programmed, that would have to be a program, that was entered into the general software of your computer, wouldn't it? Shane agrees. And of course, it would then be readable upon an examination of your computer. Yes. So, it would be evident if that was a setting that was functioning on the computer, because they would have the data when they, look through the computer for the information that we have up to this point. So it says, if I was to suggest to you that there was an auto disengage function within your FreeServe program, which disengaged after a period of 20 minutes of idleness, and he says yes, would that surprise you, or would that be consistent with your experience? He said that would be consistent with my experience, but I thought it was more like 2 hours. 2 hours, 20 minutes, what's the difference? With the exception of an hour and 40 minutes. Well, in any event, you see, Mr. Mitchell, when we look, as we did earlier, to the trial of movement through your computer, trail of movement, in the internet session, we saw that the last period of activity was that's supposed to be 1706. And the disconnect was at 1716 and 17 seconds. Do you see that? And he says, you are taking that from 2 different clocks. Yes, I am. One clock, the other could have been accounted for 20 minutes. You're quite right. It may not be, but the 2 times may not be absolutely precise. But we don't see anything like a 2-hour period of I think that's 2 period inactivity, do we? No, well, you've just said the period was 20 minutes. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And we don't see 20 minutes of an activity, do we? You see 10 minutes of an activity. Yes, see 10 minutes. Allowing for 10 minutes of error, there is quite possibly more than 10 minutes of error on my clock on my computer. Well, you see, that's been looked at, Mr. Mitchell. The computer time has been checked already. We've worked out that we've heard evidence about the fact your computer was time checked, yes. And it's accurate to within quite narrow minutes. We've heard about that, and it's not 10 minutes out. Okay, so we're not dealing with a 20-minute period, are we? If you say so. Shame. We're not. It's 17. That's supposed to be 1706 to 1716. So 5:15. 5:05. Yeah. Anyway, you get the point. A little typo there. And if you say, Shane replied, if you say so, I don't know that for a fact. Sorry. Well, I mean, there probably is a lot of people that have already testified to some of the stuff that's been said here. We've already heard, obviously, Alan Turnbull talk about the examination of the computer. I imagine, that we'll have some form of transcript of people talking about this at some point, which will all link in. So I don't know that for a fact. You kind of probably already do, Shane. This is the kind of digging the heels in and pretending. It's a very Boris Johnson way kind of argument. I don't know that. Why am I bringing up Bojo on this? Jesus. So carrying on. Let's move on from that. Then, having been on the internet after your mother came home, did you go downstairs? He says yes. And as we touched on a moment or two ago, You didn't tell her, naturally, what you'd been doing upstairs. No. Can you imagine that? Aye, Mum, just had a wicked wank. It's absolutely amazing. Should have been there. Okay, when you were upstairs initiating the internet process, when you were watching the pornography and when you think you were masturbating, if I follow you correctly, you thought you were on your own in the house. And he says, yes, just going over this again and again to reiterate the fact that Shane did believe he was on his own. Otherwise he wouldn't have done that. Or, again, and that's in his own words, I'm not just speculating here. So, okay, if you'd gone downstairs after leaving your bedroom and seen Luke in the process of making a meal in the kitchen, what would you have realised? That I wasn't alone. Okay, and bearing in mind that you have been, what you've been doing upstairs, if when you went down, you realised that you hadn't been alone, what would you have thought? He says, I don't know. Well, think about it. What would you have thought? I'd have thought, oh, that was close. You got there in the end. I don't know why you tried to work around yourself with that. Exactly. So by the court, I didn't quite catch that. And Shane repeats, I'd have thought, oh, that was close. So, yes, and continued by Alan Turnbull here, because you realised for all you'd known, he might have come upstairs during the internet session. Shane says yes. You might have been disturbed, which would have been embarrassing. Yes. And okay, if you'd come downstairs, seen Luke making a meal and thought to yourself that was close, then that would give you a particular basis for remembering that picture, wouldn't it? Probably, yes. So just saying, basically, if you thought you'd nearly been caught having a little wee sly shot of yourself, that probably would have stuck in your mind that was the day you nearly got caught. Which I suppose it would definitely, if you remembered that was everything would kind of link in that sense, I think. I've not been in the situation, but just, going by anecdotal evidence. So did you see Luke when you went downstairs after the internet session? He says, I don't remember. Now remember, this is the day where his brother was accused of murder. You think that he would be able to place him somewhere. He can place himself everywhere else, like we've discussed. But now we're starting to get into vague, I don't know. And at the end of the day, this should be, yes, we all had dinner together. Moving on, so we can get this, because I'm starting to rant now. Well, just think about it. And bear in mind the discussion we've just been through. And he says, I genuinely do not remember seeing my brother. All right, he may have been there, but I don't remember whether I saw him or not. What a pile of bollocks. That is some arse from elbow round about the house's way, just not saying he wasn't there, really. Trying to soften the blow, but he might have been, but I don't remember. Just say no, you didn't see him. You've said it before, and you've hinted at it before, and now you want to take a step back, which is all about self-protection, which is something we discussed in the summary. But, again, well, you said 2 or 3 different things there, Mr. Mitchell, and I want to look at them. If you had gone down and seen your brother, you would have realised that you'd had a close shave, and it might have been, and that he might have disturbed you. And he says, not necessarily. Now he's changing his mind. What do you mean? He could have came in with my mother. I don't have a very good recollection of that day's events, because what happened immediately after it. Now he's saying he could have come home with his mother, and that's something I might discuss in the future. But a little theory I've got. But now he might come home with his mother, so he wasn't in the house cooking dinner when Shane got home. Either way, Shane is not putting Luke in that kitchen when he gets back. So you need to look at it like that. There is no mince and tatties or whatever it was. It was pie and tatties, wasn't it? Burnt pie. It reminds me of The Rock.
Do you like pie?
Of course, that was your own explanation. Now, if that's what happened, then of course that would give you a good reason and basis for remembering it, wouldn't it? Perhaps. Have you ever thought, Mr. Mitchell, that I remember Luke was downstairs in the kitchen when I came down, because I realised when I saw him that I might have been caught watching pornography. I never thought it for that reason, but I have thought it. I never thought it for that reason, but I have thought it. What a sentence. Alright, you've never thought it for that reason. So let's look at that then. Are you able to recollect whether or not he was in the kitchen when you went down? No, I'm not. You're not. Okay, but but what we have already established is that you thought you were alone in the house when you commenced the internet session. Yes. Okay, now we know that you were at home because of the fact there is a record to vouch for that, don't we? Yes. We don't need to rely on recollection. It's beyond question now. If you had gone downstairs after the internet session and Luke was there in the kitchen, then he would be there to be seen, wouldn't he? Possibly, if he'd been in the kitchen. Sorry? If he had been in the kitchen, Shane reiterates. Yes, if he was in the kitchen. In the kitchen.
In the kitchen, Meg.
And when you went into the kitchen, then he would be there to be seen. Yes. Okay. And of course, this would operate two ways, wouldn't it? Because if he was in the kitchen and you went down, then you would be there for him to see. And he says yes. Okay, I want you to look at something with me, please. And it's another document, production number 40. So Lord Nimble Smith says, we're going to have to take a break for the day quite soon, Advocate Depute. And Alan Turnbull replies, perhaps I could just do this one passage then, my lord. He agrees. So production 40 is another transcript of an interview, Mr. Mitchell. He says yes. And the interview that your brother had with a police officer on 4th of July 2003. Do you follow me? He says yes. Look at me, please, at page 111. Do you have page 111? Yes. And you'll understand that your mother was present at this interview as well. Okay, yes. You'll see the reference to her on that page. And he says yes. And the suspect is Luke speaking. Yes. And it's a discussion between Luke and the police officers about having his tea. Correct. Right. And the question is, did you have your tea? Do you see that? It's the second question down from the top. Again, for the guys that are across the pond, tea is dinner, the evening meal. In Scotland we call it tea. It's not the hot beverage. It's not the antithesis of coffee. It is in fact dinner. So again, do you see that? It's the second question down from the top. Shane says yes. Answer, yeah, I had it before I left. Question, before you left? Answer, yeah. Question, was that with Shane and your mum? Answer, my mum. You were there. Shane wasn't, was he? Mother, no. Do you see that? And Shane says yes. Continues on. With that in mind, you said you'd phoned. Answer, yes. Do you think you'd phoned Shane? Do you remember if he said he was going to be later or? And I think he said he was going to be later. Do you see that? Shane agrees again. So Luke is putting Shane outside the house at the time of dinner. Shane puts himself in the house before the dinner would have been eaten. None of these are matching up. And Luke's statement will change. He will put Shane in the house. But at this time, during the interview for July 4th, Shane is nowhere to be seen in the eyes of Luke Mitchell or Corrine Mitchell. So the idea of change statements, or again, on the Jones side of things, I cannot see so far. But right here, we've got conclusive proof that Luke Mitchell and Shane Mitchell both changed their statements, and we'll go on to why. Okay, and what we looked at just a moment or two ago was that you did have a telephone call at about 4:05 between yourself and your brother at home. And he says yes. Okay, and at that time you were on your way to help your friend with his car. Shane says, Right, Now, and now on exactly the same point, I want you to look forward to page 139 with me, please. And he says, okay. In the middle of the page, you'll see the question, right, did you see Shane? He says, yes. Answer, he wasn't in, so I'd say no. Mother, did he not give you the torch? And then Luke answers, aye, that's when I went out looking for Jodi, not at this point. Question, right, so Shane wasn't in at that point. Answer, yeah, Shane wasn't in the house when I left. No. Do you see that? Shane says, yes, I see that. That must have been soul destroying for the boy when he's trying to lie and put his cell in the house, and then his brother is trying to put him out of the house, and he kind of knows that his brother's guilty of all this stuff, in my opinion, and he's still being thrown under the bus by Corinne and Luke. Fantastic. So carrying on and finishing up the day 2 here. Okay, so when you went down from the internet session after your mum came in, obviously she would have been there. Sorry, lost the page. For you to speak to, yes. Okay, you would see her. Pardon? You would see her. Yes. And she was there, wasn't she? Yes. And she would see you. Yes. And if Luke was there, you would be able to see him. Yes. You say you don't recollect now whether he was there or not. But equally, if he was there, he would be able to see you. Yes. Unless he was out in the garden. Well, no, that's not the question. Anyway, of course, but you've just seen what he said in the answer to those questions, haven't you? Well, we've got some way to go with all this, Mr. Mitchell. But I want you to reflect on the question of whether Luke was there when you went down. Would you do that? He says, okay. Kind of taking a quick stop there. Again, as I said in the summarisation, the idea kind of giving an answer which isn't really related but might make it look innocent. So he wouldn't have seen him if he was in the garden. We've already established the fact that Luke says he didn't see him at dinner or before he left the house. So I think he's trying to place, this isn't Clue with Tim Curry. So there's no secret compartments in the house. It's not like he's going to go through a painting in a different room. This is, again, Shane's trying to make himself look good. Like I said in the summarisation as well, there is a part of this that's trying to make himself look a little bit more innocent. I think especially given the fact that he was accused of perverting the course of justice. So, last page of day 2. And what's your answer at this stage? So Shane says, to the question, incomprehensible, to the question of whether Luke was there when you went down. And he says, I can't give you a definite answer. Do you think he was there? And he says, it's not my place to think, sir. No, it's your place to know, because you're actually on a stand giving evidence. But be cheeky if you want, Shane. He goes in here. Well, it is, you see, because you're the other party who was in the room. You're the one we know for definite was in the house, because we've got that record. If we want to know who else was in the house, we can't go to anyone better than you. When you went down, do you think he was there? And he says, I don't know. Alright, we can pick up from there tomorrow. Lord Nimmo Smith says, yes, we'll break now, ladies and gentlemen. Incomprehensible. Just a little past 4:30. We'll start again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And you're to be back here then, please, Mr. Mitchell. As I said before, don't discuss the case with anybody. So there's day 2 out the way. Little bit of day 3. There's a couple of pages in day 3. And then we'll do a quick wrap up of this video. And that's us, guys. Thank you. So, last day 3 of Shane Mitchell's testimony. There's the index there. with the examination in chief deputy, blah, 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 blah. And you'll see underneath there, the index has Corinne Mitchell as well, which is after next week we'll be doing Shane Mitchell's defence question with Donald Finlay next week. Next to game week, we're on to Corinne Mitchell. So there's the next 3 weeks essentially. Shane next week, and 2 parts for Corinne Mitchell's as well. These will, I think this one here is the longest video I will do on this. I'm hoping it is. So thank you again to anyone that's managed to stick through this. But yeah, so that's where we'll go from there, just so you've got a rough idea what we're looking at over this month. Shane 1 and 2, Corinne 3 and 4. Moving on to some other witnesses after the fact. But again, I'll give you a head shout if you want to read up on stuff before we get into it. So getting into this here and finishing this off on day 3 and finishing off this video. Woohoo. So Shane Mitchell, examination in chief continued by the Advocate Depute. Now Mr Mitchell, you remember that yesterday afternoon we spent a little time discussing the events of Monday 30th of June 2003. Shane agrees, and by the way, you would fucking hope so, because that's what you're there to talk about. Seems like a strange one, but anyway, I suppose you've got to bring everybody into the conversation. Okay, I'm conscious of the fact that it was a long time ago, but you've been able to answer some of my questions, haven't you? Yes, something we discussed in the summary. Okay, I want you to take stock of just where we've got to before we move on this morning, because I now see that there's a record to demonstrate that you were home by 5 to 5 that afternoon. He says yes. And you were there's also a record to show that the internet sites you were watching at that time. He says yes. Okay, so we don't need to trouble ourselves about that. That's inarguable, isn't it? Yes. Okay. You also told me when I asked about it, that you thought you were masturbating. He says yes. Okay, and you told us that you would have not been content to do this with someone else in the house. Yes. Okay, and you also told me that you would not have downloaded pornography if someone was in the house. Yes. You told us that you would have checked the house to see if someone else was in. Yes. We saw you explained to the police on the 14th of April that you popped your head in the living room. Yes. And you told me that you must have done that. And he says yes. Okay, you then told us that your mother returned home from work, was in the house about 5:15. Yes. And you told us that you went downstairs and you saw your mother. Yes. You told us that if you had realised on going downstairs that you had not been alone in the house, you would have thought, well, that was a close thing. And he says yes. It was a close one, but anyway. Okay, when I asked you the question, who did you think was in the house when you were accessing these sites? And you said no one, and Shane agrees again. Okay, well that explains your thinking at about 5 to 5 towards 5 o'clock, doesn't it? Yes. Well, I want you to go on and examine whether or not Luke was in the kitchen down the stairs after your mother returned home. Now, in order to do this, I think we have to get the context right, because the interview on the 14th of April last year was the first time you admitted to the police that you'd been watching pornography, wasn't it? He says yes. So this was really the first time that the police were able to ask you questions about whether anyone else was in the house, and ask those questions in the proper context, wasn't it? Yes. Because up until then, you hadn't told them what you'd been doing. He says no. Okay, but of course, right from the very beginning, right from the afternoon of the 30th of June, the truth was you'd been watching pornography. Yes. And that's always been the truth, hasn't it? Yes. You explained to me that yesterday you didn't tell the police that because you were embarrassed. Yes. Understandably. Okay, but of course, despite being embarrassed, that was nevertheless what you'd been doing. Yes. And so it had always been true that what you'd been doing. Yes. Just really hammer that point through there, Alan. And accordingly, you must always have known that that's what you had been doing. Yes. Yes. Okay, and by the 14th of April of last year, when you did tell the police what you'd been doing, and they did ask you questions in the context of what else was in the house, did you have a view as to whether your brother was in the house or not? He says, what do you mean? By the time the police were asking you questions on the 14th of April last year, did you have an impression or opinion as to whether you or not your brother was in the house when you went down to after the internet session? He says, when asked in context, I didn't think she was in the house. She, I think that's a typo. That's meant to be he. Okay, and that's what you told the police? Yes. Okay, and is that the truth then, Mr. Mitchell? That you didn't think that he was in the house, meaning Luke. He says, I don't think so, no. Okay, and accordingly, when you went down after terminating the internet session, did you see him in the kitchen? He says, I don't believe so. And that's what you told the police in April, isn't it? It's incomprehensible. Imagine he agrees there, however, because it just carries on. They don't look to clarify the question, so I imagine he agreed. So now later on that evening, did you go out? He says, yes. Did you remember where you went? And he says, back to C-Word's house. Well, it's just a different C-word, I think. And is he a friend? Yes. So it's a different friend from the one he was going to fix the car for, which he didn't do. So, in Broxburn, I believe it was. Okay, and if you look at me again, please, at the document which records the list of your telephone calls, you might be able to work out when you left. The production is 246. Sorry, could we see it on the screen, please? Now, we looked, remember, yesterday at the call of 4 minutes past 6. That's when you were on your way to Mr. House. Yes. The next call from your mobile is 20 past 6. Do you see that? Yes. And do you recognise that number that's been called? Yes. Whose is that? He says that's number. Okay. Now you've just, to cross-reference this, look at production 212. It's probably easier if I show you the page. Now if you just put the calls from your landline on the phone, thank you, this is a record of the telephone calls from your house telephone that evening. He says, and you'll see that there's calls that are made from the house. You'll see that there are no calls at all made from the house between 1601 and 2157 when there is a call to a Bathgate number. He says, So when you see that you appear to have called from your mobile but not the landline, correct? Does that give you an assistance as to remembering what time you left to go and see? He says, I left to go and see just after I phoned him. Just after you phoned him? Yes. So that would be just after 20 past 6. Okay. And had you been home then accordingly between 5 to 5 and let's say 20 past 6? Yes. Alright, and after spending some time with Mr. Did you return home that evening? Yes. Do you know approximately what time? As soon as I got in the house, I, incomprehensible, phone, so round about 10 o'clock. Did you make this call to the Bathgate number? Yes. Okay, so that we see at 3 minutes to 10, yes. And you were obviously home by then, yes. So she made the call to the Bathgate number, is it? Yeah. So if we say 5 to 10, that means you were out between 20 past 6 and 5 to 10. Yes. In June of last year, in your back garden, there was a log burner, wasn't there? Yes. And that could be used to burn rubbish to other items. He says yes, if it would fit inside it. There's a little sly caveat. If it would fit inside it, of course. Do you sometimes use that log burner? He says once or twice. Did you use it on the evening of Monday the 30th of June 2003? He says no. We'll get on to that and other things. We'll come back to that. I want to look now at then, please, Mr. Mitchell, at something that's connected to what we've been discussing, but I want you to look at it in a slightly different way to try and get an understanding of something. It was, of course, a long time until you told the police that you had been watching pornography on the afternoon of Monday the 30th of June. But we know that. You've been candid enough to tell us that. It's a long time till you told us that. He says yes. Okay, we know that you told the police on the 14th of April last year you had told your mother by 14th of April what you'd been doing in the evening on Monday the 30th of June. He says no. Okay, I want you to go back then, Mr. Mitchell, to the fact that you first of all gave a statement to the police on the 3rd of July, which is only a few days after the killing, wasn't it? He says yes. And you gave a second statement on the 7th of July, which is a week after the killing. He says yes. And the statements were different, weren't they? And Shane says yes. Again, change statements on the Mitchell side, guys. You probably need to have your statements in front of you to help me with this. It's production 157. Have you got those? He says yes. Okay, the first one, you'll remember, is the one in which you said to the police that you were home by 20 to 4. Yes. And that wasn't right, was it? No. Okay, in the second statement, on 7th of July 1, was the one where you told the police that you were home about 5 to 5. He says yes. Was that right? He says yes, I was home at 5 to 5. Okay, we've seen the record which shows that you were in the house at that time. Yes. I want you to look at some other things though. And you said in the statement on the 7th of July, and go back again to the page we were looking at before. It's the 19th page in. Do you have that? He says, I'm just getting it. Okay, right. You'll see the point that we're looking at before when we identified the time you got home. Yes, right. I want you just to identify what's written next to the statement to that. You understand that? So I'll read it to you, alright? Okay. I can't remember if my mum's car was in the driveway, and all I remember is that the front door was open. I didn't have to unlock it. Are you with me so far? Shane agrees. I'm reading on from what he said again. I went into the hallway and I shouted out hello. I went straight upstairs to the bathroom to wash my hands. Shane says yes. I was only upstairs for 5 minutes. I came straight back down. You see that? He says yes. So by the court, there is the word again after down. Come straight back down again. So it's just saying there was another word there that they'd missed out. It is, my lord. I'm sorry, I didn't read that. So let's look at the passage, Mr. Mitchell. I went to the hallway, I shouted out hello, and I walked straight upstairs to the bathroom to wash my hands. I was only upstairs for 5 minutes, and I came straight back down again. Now that's right. That's a bit of the statement. At this point, no. But when the statement was taken, the way it was written, it's not what I would have said. What a cop-out. So he says, okay, when I was taking the statements, DC Lindsay was incomprehensible things. It was only a few days after the murder. I was extremely shaken up. My mind there was all over the place. I couldn't prevent what was happening. I find that really odd that obviously Shane can say, you know, he was in a strange mental place and all the rest of it. Luke seems to be alarmingly calm through all this with his interviews, which again I think speaks volumes, but that's just common sense, it's just maths. Okay, when she was asking me questions, every point in the statement is prompted by a different question she's asking. I told her that I couldn't remember, and she kept telling me that's not an acceptable answer. You're going to have to tell me something. And she just kept prompting me. So there are a lot of things down there that aren't as they were said. Donald Finlay will go into this in a wee bit more detail when he questions them, so just getting through this. Okay, and Shane says it was twisted. Well, we'll take that on board, and we'll try to do what we'll try to do is look at that. And when we're looking at here in a comment, however, it's come to be noted that it isn't accurate. Would that be correct? And he says yes. Okay, it goes on. When I was in the bathroom, I left the door open, Afterwards, I went downstairs to the living room, went through to the kitchen. No one was in the living room. That's what it says, I think. And he says correct. Luke was standing at the cooker, mashing the ties. Is what it says. I'm sure it is, but I can't read this handwriting. Okay, I've read it a number of times, and I'll just read it to you as I understand it. We'll see if you can follow it with me. Luke was still at the cooker mashing the ties.
I could smell burnt steak pies. Here we go. Here's the burnt pies.
Do you
It was a
like
tinge
pie?
in the smell. I said all right to Luke. Didn't mention the burning smell, as I didn't want to insult him. Are you with me so far?
Yes. Now, I've said this in other videos as well when it comes to that statement, because I have read this before on one of the Killing Time updates. I'll say it again. If someone's burning my dinner, I don't give a flying fuck if I'm offending them. Stop burning my dinner. I want to eat it. Take it out of the oven. That is such a ridiculous statement that it just shows the levels of insincerity in his answers for me. I didn't want to offend him because he was burning my dinner. Honestly, I think that is absolutely one of the most ridiculous things in this whole statement. And I know it's just such a small thing, but I think with such a small detail showing such a stupid way of answering a question, shows that he was always trying to find a way out for me, like I said in the summary. So, where are we here? Another 8 pages or so. Let's do this. So, it says, okay, he was pretty happy. I spoke to him and my mum at that point. So, in this version of events, he's got them both with him. When Luke was mashing tatties, that was the first time I'd seen my mum and Luke from coming into the house. My mum described her day, the general things. The good things, by the court. He says, the good things, yes, thank you. And the bad things. I can't remember what she said. I normally switch off when she talks. I've got a habit of doing that with everybody as well. I normally switch off if she talks bad about a customer, i.e. if a customer doesn't like dogs and she doesn't like them. And the next passage, I want you to concentrate on carefully with me, from Alan Turnbull, goes back into the quote. I went back upstairs, I switched on the computer, I was about to log on to the internet and I got shouted down for dinner by Luke. I'd only been upstairs for 5 minutes and I didn't get onto the internet. You understand what I've just read to you? Yes. Lies. That's what he's just read to you. He's your own lies, Shane. Okay, now that business about being downstairs in the kitchen and then going back up and trying to connect to the internet, but being unsuccessful can't be right, can it? No, and I've explained to you the reason about that. When I was giving my statement to Michelle Lindsay, I honestly couldn't remember. I was still shaken up. I genuinely couldn't remember what was happening, and she prompted me. She says, right Shane, you had tatties for dinner. How did the tatties get there? Picture in your mind's eye. Do you see your brother? I said I don't know. I can't remember. He made the tea all of the night. And she said, all of the night? Fuck, what a sentence. She says, think back to the night where you were in your house. Can you picture Luke making tatties? I said, yes, I can picture Luke making tatties. And then she wrote that down, that Luke was making tatties. Well, it came from somewhere. So it's not like she just said, oh, do you think Luke was making ties? You must have said it during the interview itself for her to say, right, well, this is what you've told us. Can we go over this? In your previous statement. You've got to, answer to what you got wrong before. This isn't a hardship. Police asking questions. Like I've said before in the summary as well, the idea that, asking a suspected killer and their co-conspirators hard questions is somehow interrogation. But I mean, wow, honestly, colour me surprised. Fuck's sake. So carrying on anyway. Okay, so you would explain, Mr. Mitchell, that this wasn't a verbatim record of what you spoke, and he says yes. No evidence to prove that. It's all Shane's word, and considering how much he's full of shit so far. This is a mixture of question and answer, isn't it? Yes. Alright. Well, however, it came to be written down. The point I want to understand and be clear about, and it's not right, is it? He says yes. It's not accurate, is it? No. Now, I want you to examine in particular how it came to be that you gave certain of this information to the police, and in particular, this is what I wanted to be careful with, I want you to understand how it came to be that you would give the police this account, including, as you did, references to mashing tatties and there being a smell of burnt steak pies. You understand what I'm talking about? Yes. Right. And what I want to ask you to look at in the context is another statement, and this is a different production. It's a production 156. Now you'll see that as another handwritten statement, Mr. Mitchell. He says yes. There is a collection of them. The one I want you to look at with me is called, it's number S8A on the box on the right hand side, and it's dated 6th of July. Okay, you've got that one? Yes. You'll see from the entry at the top of the page, this is a statement from your mother gave to police. And he says yes. And it's dated 6th of July, which is the day before the statement you gave. Which is the one we've been discussing. And he says yes. You'll see, I hope, that the pages are numbered in the top right hand corner, aren't they? Yes. Way! Well done, guys. Okay, go through to page number 31, please. Right. 6 lines down from the top, there is a new paragraph that starts, do you see that? He says yes. And it reads, when I got in, Luke was in the kitchen. Do you see that? Yes. He finds... he first of all produced the broccoli, which looked a funny colour, so decided not to cook it. I'm not sure I can read the next word, so we had something else. It might be, by the court, looks like beans. Looks like beans. There's a saying for you. Let's get that. Don't be a Derek. Looks like beans. It might be beans. It might be beans. The next passage I'm particularly interested in, Mr. Mitchell. Okay. Luke then strained the potatoes and mashed them. Right. Did he use butter? I like to use a lot of butter when I'm mashing ties. Don't know about you guys. We touch your milk. Just scare it well. Anyway, that's another channel. We'll do cooking tips, straining pasta. At that point, I think Shane came in and I could smell the pies in the oven, so I asked one of them to take them out, which he did, commenting that Luke had overdone them. Do you see that? Yes. She's no scared to offend people. So, in your mother's statement the day before, there's reference to Luke mashing tatties, isn't there? Yes. And there's also reference to pies and them being overdone. And he says yes. Okay. And if you come with me to a statement the very next day, we see that includes references to you saying, that Luke was mashing ties. We've just seen that. Haven't we? Yes. And to there being a burnt smell? Yes. Okay. Now I'm trying to understand how it can be that you came to give the police some information which is incorrect, and information which includes references to mashing tatties and burnt pies. Do you understand that? Yes. Before you gave that statement on the 7th of July, remember the change statement from the original, 7 days after the murder of Jodi Jones. So before you gave that statement on the 7th of July, did you discuss with anyone what you should say to the police? He says, and again, we've read this before, in a way. Alright, who did you discuss it with? My ma. For those people who are not Scottish, he means his mum, his mother, his ma. And what do you mean by you discussed it in a way? Help us understand that. Shane says, after giving my first statement, coming home and thinking about it, I realised that it was wrong. I realised that nearly everything about it was wrong because my head got so screwed up because of what had been going on. Okay, I couldn't think straight. I genuinely couldn't remember a single thing about that day. My memories were completely, and they were all over the place. Alright, let's just catch up with this, please. I like that. I'm asking a question here. From Turnbull. This is the statement you're telling us about that you gave on the 3rd of July. The one where you'd said you came home at 20 to 4. Yes, so after that you realised you'd said things to the police that weren't right. You were confused about things. Shane says yes, but I still couldn't remember exactly what happened. So I said to my mum, I can't remember what happened. Okay, and then I couldn't remember. I went to Maxie's, but I couldn't. But I couldn't remember what happened after that. She says to me, "Well, you came in, and Luke was with us. We had the tatties for dinner, and then you went out again, and
incomprehensible, probably like aye or something. Thought about it some more and remembered I came home later, what time I went out and everything. Okay, well now, but I give you the statement on, this is the 7th. Is this the 7th? And he says, the 7th. I didn't say for definite I saw Luke in the kitchen. It's, as I was saying earlier on, I was prompted by DC Lindsay. Okay, she wouldn't take for an answer that I wasn't sure. She wrote down in no uncertain terms. Well, I hear what you're saying about that, but let's see what you've been telling us. Are you telling us then that you were trying to say to the police that you weren't sure Luke was in the kitchen and you, when you went down? And he says yes. He wasn't sure he was in the kitchen, but he was making you ties. Fuck. Okay, now we've seen what's recorded in the statement. Yes. Something slightly different is recorded in the statement. Yes. Okay. But when I signed that statement, I'd been questioned for over 5 hours. I was tired, confused, hungry. I wanted to go home. I wanted to get out of there. I didn't have the energy left to do anything further about it. Okay, so even a week after the killing, are you saying that you were unsure if Luke was in the kitchen? Yes. Right. A week after the killing isn't a very long time when you're in the situation. No. And as we've seen, after time passed and it got to April, you were re-interviewed by the police. You told them then for the first time you'd actually been watching pornography. You told them in that taped interview that you didn't think Luke was in the kitchen when you were down. Yes. And that's your view still? Yes. Okay. If it had been for that discussion with your mother, would you have been able to give the police any information? Shane says not very much, just a little bit. I'd be able to tell them I went to Maxie's, probably after speaking to I would have been able to tell them once I'd went to house. At the point, I couldn't remember anything. Is it okay? Did the discussion with your mother affect what you told the police? Yes. Right. Well now, Mr. Mitchell, that's all. This has all been going on for a long time now, hasn't it? He says yes. Since the 30th of June 2003, one thing has been true, namely, you were in your own house by 5 to 5, watching your computer and accessing the internet sites. Yes. Okay, and it's always been since that day been true that you started off by watching pornographic sites. Yes. It has always since that day been true that you took certain steps to make sure the house was empty. Shane agrees again. Before you did that, yes, including looking in the living room. That must be the case. I can't remember that part. I might have done. He says, okay, it's always been true that you didn't hear music being played from the dining room. Yes. It's always been true that you thought you were on your own. Yes. And despite the way things have been recorded, incomprehensible, can I ask you a question? Did I ever say, I think it'd be you, I heard music coming from the dining room? No. No, you didn't. You're quite right. And he says no. That's the very point. And it's always been true, Mr. Mitchell, despite the way it has been recorded, that you have no recollection of seeing Luke when you went downstairs in the kitchen and your mum came home. Shane says yes. So we've now reached the truth then, Mr. Mitchell, haven't we? Yes. And the truth doesn't change, does it? No. How could it be, Mr. Mitchell, that Luke was in the house, you didn't think he was there, you didn't hear him, and then have no recollection of seeing him there if he was? And he says, you tell me. Yes, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Now that leads on to Donald Finley's question, so that's all we've got there in terms of this. Thank you very much, guys, for watching this. Just to wrap this up very quickly, seeing as we have our summarisation, please, if you do see anything that I've missed out, especially in my summarisation or anything, any comments that I've made that you think you can kind of build on in terms of what your thoughts and opinions are, please, if you've not put them in the live chat and you're not here,
then put them in the comments below. And really, I think what I'd like to do with this as well, guys, not only do I put this here because obviously a lot of people aren't going to be, on online forums or online blogs. The ability is there for them to look at the transcripts, but not a lot of people work that way. Some people do like to have things read to them, and some people just like to slap on a video in the background when they're doing the housework. So these things can all be shown in different mediums, and I think what the transcripts guys are doing in terms of putting that up is fantastic, and I'll put it here as well. Thank you very much to the people that have done that. At the end of the day, the guys, I don't want to drag on and kind of blow smoke up their ass, but the guys were shown that the people they'd followed in terms of Sandra Lean were liars, and they were keeping them in the dark about information. It would have been really easy for those people then to just down tools and walk away, but they genuinely wanted to know the truth. And I think the finding out that Sandra had been lying to them maybe piqued their interest in other areas, which was really beneficial to showing my side of things in terms of what I think, in my opinion, when I started all this. The first video I done, my opinion piece was slated. A lot of the people I spoke to, the information that I've found out since, and the things that I've reported on have tended to come true. Now, when I am just a guy on the internet that's doing a little bit of research, and I've had more hits than the criminologist and the supposed lawyer that's the expert, I think people really need to have a good look at this. So in this, as I say, this one's a bit of a long one, and it's a little bit beige in terms of the normal stuff I do, but I needed to do this one and put this one here, guys. Other ones will be a little bit more entertaining, I'm sure, because I'll be able to do a little bit more. I have a skeleton now where I can do an edit for these videos, so it'll be a lot easier. This was the editing torture is the best way I can put it. I've also managed to get ill in the time in between I started recording this as well, so getting old. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me through all of this. I really want you guys to tell me what you think about a lot of this. If you have any preempted stuff that you think about Donald Finley's questioning, or anything that links in with what he's going to ask to what we've already seen, then put it down below. As I say, I'll be doing the defence question next week. We will be comparing some of this, what we've already said, in that video. So it'd be really good if you guys have got anything that you want me to kind of talk about at the time as well. We can kind of get ahead of it. So yeah, leave any comments down below. What do you guys think of the fact that Shane does not put Luke in the house at this point, and we can see that Luke doesn't put Shane in the house either? So both of them have occupied the house with either out with it, but the only one that we can prove being in the house is Shane. So what's your thoughts on that? And if you've not read Donald Finley's questioning, here's a little question for you. How do you think Donald Finley is going to find a way around the fact that Shane can't put Luke in the house and Luke doesn't put Shane in the house? Now, this bears talking about here as well, just before I wrap up. The timings for Shane leaving the house, he puts it at 6:20. That's not the time that we've heard from Corrine and Luke. Now, that time that was given was actually before 6. And I'm sure we'll go into it all again and just start referencing our own videos. It'll be a bit meta. I can just put clips of my own stuff here. But put in some killing time and stuff as well, because this will all come back. And, the vindication meme, or GIF, however you fucking pronounce it, that's coming more and more true by every transcript I read. Kind of dating this one here, but one of the latest ones that have came out is from an expert, a dog expert from Transcribed Police. Now, I did say in a previous video how air scent and trail scent dogs don't work the same. You can't have both you know, kind of, what's the word for it? You can't do both, essentially. It's not bicentennial is a word that I made up on Twitter. I think I made it up. I have fucking no idea. That's a very Donald Trump way of thinking about it. I made up the word fake news. As I say, I had said beforehand that is a scientific impossibility, and I got laughed off because there's all these Mia found her idiots on Twitter and Facebook, thinking that some random Alsatian can find a body in the woods because they watched Lassie and The Littlest Hobo, and they've taken that as reality. Not true, can't happen. We will go into that transcript as well, but at the end of the day, again, to the guys that are doing the transcripts, you are by proxy, you're not mean to, but you're proving me right on a lot of points, so thank you for that as well. I don't think that's what you set out to do, though. No offence, guys, honestly, it's just generally funny. Right, so leave your comments down below. As we always say, give us a sarcastic thumbs up. Remember, we know when it's sarcastic. It's a new YouTube thing. What you do is you hit like, hit it again, and then hit like again. So hit 3 times, and then I know it's sarcastic. It'll tell me. Trust me. Trust me! Right, guys, sarcastic thumbs up. As always, comments down below. Subscribe if you want to keep up with this one. I assure you this is the longest one we'll do. Do not be a Derek. It looks like beans. And enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.